Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1193 of the War News stream. And we have crazy news today. Absolutely crazy. Ukraine destroyed 34% of the Russian bomber fleet in total today. Also, explosions were reported at a Russian nuclear subbase near Murmansk. And also, there's been mass attacks across Moscow as of just a couple hours ago. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're covering the past 48 hours of news from around the world, as last night's stream unfortunately had to be interrupted and canceled right at the beginning. But tonight, we are going to be getting through every single major piece of news over the past 48 hours of news coverage that we've had around the entirety of the world, as today we have seen the largest attack that has ever occurred of this type in the entirety of the history of the world, the Russian Federation, the war in Ukraine, and every other war that has ever occurred throughout the course of human history, as the first entirely AI-operated drone base attack occurred by the armed forces of Ukraine today, attacking and targeting multiple air bases throughout the entirety of the Russian Federation, and as of a result, 34% of all Russian strategic bombers are currently a pile of cinders on 5 different airfields throughout the entirety of the Russian Federation, with many Russians calling it the Russian Pearl Harbor. We have also been able to hear that a significant submarine base in the Murmansk area of the Arctic Fleet, or the Northern Fleet, has ended up exploding today and has caught on fire, as video and picture evidence emerged from the Russian city of Severomorsk, just next door to the actual submarine facility, showing significant fires as explosions were being heard from the facility of the base, as well as explosions also being seen as well. We also were able to find out that the People's Republic of China has threatened the United States publicly about getting involved in support of the Republic of China on the island of Taiwan, while they've also further threatened the United States with a major space-based arms race if the United States continues to press forward with the Golden Dome system, claiming that the United States would be weaponizing space, although the People's Republic of China has already done so in the past. Inside the Republic of India, we've been able to hear of a minor incident that may turn major as 2 Indian border guards shot and killed a Pakistani citizen as he was approaching the border 36 hours ago. Meanwhile, inside of the Russian Federation, we have been able to see, once again to cover this, that pretty much every single major airfield, except for the Ingles Air Base, that houses Russian strategic bombers, has been targeted, with a large amount of those bombers being destroyed. 34% of the Russian bomber fleet at this very moment, meaning about 34 out of every 100 bombers that the Russian Federation had in the Russian Air Force, has been destroyed at this point. We have also been able to hear that a major missile production facility exploded within the vicinity of Moscow as a massive campaign conducted by either Ukrainian partisans or pro-Ukrainian forces inside the Russian Federation have planted bombs and destroyed a massive number of railway bridges throughout the areas of Bryansk and the Kursk oblasts, as well as what we've been hearing are some rumors in Voronezh with attacks being conducted on Ukrainian railroads inside of Russian-occupied Ukraine. The Ukrainian Armed Forces has also been able to hold the lines over the past 48 hours, although I do have to say, due to the massive amount of news that we have in literally every other area of the world today, we were not able to include any frontline video or picture evidence from today, but I can tell you that defensive operations are being conducted the very same as yesterday as today. It is a massive day today. It is actually as massive, I would say, if not more massive, than the information of about the 2 million documents that were leaked on classified Russian nuclear facilities and sites inside of the Russian Federation just a few days ago. And what is even crazier about this is that the entire thing was orchestrated and operated right next door to the Russian FSB headquarters in Chelyabinsk. We're going to be getting into all of this tonight, every single bit of it from top to bottom, and we have gone through a lot of painstaking detail, time, and effort to make sure that we have the story as well put together and well thought out as we could and researched before we came on air. I want to also make sure to point out that tonight is the Sunday night fundraiser for Nova Ukraine. And if you would like to help the Ukrainians to victory, because they sure as hell are helping themselves a great bit, you can support the fundraiser, which is attached to this stream right now. But moving on from that and into the major news today, I'm going to be starting y'all off on the way that the story began earlier in the morning. A good while ago at this point, but it's still fresh on many people's minds. This has been the most impactful attack on the Russian military that we've ever seen so far. Earlier in the day, near to an area of the city of Irkutsk, we were able to see that a 18-wheeler, or as it's called in some places, a semi-truck, pulled over on the side of the road, apparently to take a small rest or to be able to unload cargo. On the back of this 18-wheeler, as we would call it here in the United States, or a semi-truck in Europe, we were able to see 2 20-foot-long container boxes, an ISO standard. Something of a little bit of an interesting thing for all of y'all to know, if you're from Europe or the United States, is that there's actually 2 approved international sizes of shipping containers. One is the 40-foot long container and one is the 20-foot long container. They're made to be modular where they can all interconnect with each other, but that's beyond the point. These are 2 specially made intermodal containers. They are up to ISO standards, but it appears that one thing that was not up to ISO standards was what their mission was, because a Russian citizen who apparently was in the same rest stop filmed as drones began to emerge from the very top of these shipping containers and began to rocket off into the distance away from the containers on the back of this 18-wheeler and directly towards the airbase just nearby, the Belaya airbase, which houses a significant number of Tu-95 and Tu-22 M3 strategic bombers of the Russian Federation, not only considered a major nuclear deterrent, but a major standoff weapon that the Russian Federation has used against Ukraine and has used to instill a realm of fear around its borders for decades at this point. The drones then immediately started to fly away.
Коптер опять взлетел. Откуда взлетает, ничего не понятно, блядь.
Hey, that doesn't
Вот
look
он,
normal.
клоун, блядь.
Like a mobile hornet's nest.
Man, I don't know what this guy is doing. He's like almost like a sports commentator. He's like, "What shit, no, boy? What's I did the bill?" It's like, bro, it's a drone. Just film it. Like, it's like,
всего, сука. Оба. Вот дела, блядь. Ёб твою мать, до чего техника дошла. А нахуя мы работаем за рулем-то, блядь?
and there goes one drone.
Управляй, нахуй, грузовая и все. О!
We hear what appears to be air defense fire near to the Belaya airbase in this clip.
Это какой-то автомата
We hear
очередь
more
надо. О,
AK fire,
нихуя
it
себе
sounds
дела,
like.
блядь. Оказывается, пидорас, оказывается. Во, блядь. Менты промазали, нахуй. Ёбаный, он опять туда полетел, сука, в эту гущу, нахуй. Вот
We
еще
hear
один,
another
сука,
one
пидорас.
taking off
Вот он, еще
and
один
going on
пидорас.
its way. I once again want to keep in mind here that even by the time we were watching this clip, which did come from the Irkutsk Oblast, as we can see up here, there was already smoke rising from the airbase. And I'm actually going to show you all where this was inside the Russian Federation. This was just outside of the city of Irkutsk, which is a major city along the area of Lake Baikal. And if we move further on up away from the city of Irkutsk, and about right here, you can actually find the Belaya airbase, which is right here, directly alongside the P255 highway, which appears to be the one that this truck pulled over on, meaning that that drone that we saw taking off was taking a distance or a flight of glory of about 3.5 miles or about 4 miles to make it to the airbase. The scene at the airbase was absolutely insane. It was actually mind-blowing to see because we got to see footage, an actual clip of one of the drones flying on in, and we could see the unbelievable. An endless tarmac filled with Tu-95 strategic bombers on fire and burning from multiple impacts caused by these FPV drones that were launched from those shipping containers and other shipping containers that were surrounding the area on other 18-wheelers. These drones started to fly in and immediately started to target the weakest points on all of these aircraft, specifically the inner wing fuel tanks on each side of each Tu-95. We can see this drone actually flying over to find its target, as we can see the plumes of smoke and flames burning from each and every single aircraft that has already been hit on the tarmac. And it appears that the losses, even at this point, were significant. Out of the 4 Tu-95s that we could see in this one area of the tarmac alone, 3 of them have already been hit, and 3 of them have been completely destroyed, as we were able to confirm later. This drone appears to just be taking a joyride over the area and showing us exactly what it was looking like. We also got to see, in another clip, the attack on the airbase from another angle, which we can see right here from another drone that was flying in, once again showing us the massive plumes of smoke that were rising from the Russian Tu-95s and Tu-22M3s, which had already been hit at Belaya airbase. We also got to see even more picture and video evidence here from the satellite, confirming that there are 3 destroyed Tu-95s that were on the tarmac at Belaya. Those are the 3 that we saw on film that were on fire, and we were also able to see 1 Tu-95 parked right here that appears to have been damaged but not completely destroyed. Nevertheless, the satellite picture is clearly showing us that the fires burned so heavily and Russian fire control teams were so overwhelmed by the attack at the airbase that every single Tu-95 that was hit at Belaya burned to literal cinders, to ash on the actual tarmac, and all that is left is an outline of cinders of each aircraft that was hit in the original strike. While also I do have to add in that at least one part of one wing and also one part of another wing of a Tu-95 did survive the attack. That is still an entirely and completely thoroughly destroyed Tu-95 at Belaya airbase. Not only that, we also got to see that the truck that actually was launching the drones ended up exploding later. This is actually another 18-wheeler that was based around the area of the Belaya airbase, and we could see Russian citizens gathering around, which really isn't a good idea, but we could see that it exploded as a whole bunch of people were gathering around to try and figure out what was going on. Not really a great idea.
Oh dear, that's yeah, that's a very bad idea. Actually, that was extremely stupid to go in there after it just got done attacking like that.
Like this is literally like a cartoon. The guy's like, well, you know, the attack is over. What could go wrong? So he just goes right inside of the container. And right when he does, it just goes up. It's like you couldn't really, you know, that's almost like comedic timing nearly with how that went down. Beyond that, we also got to see, while this guy is playing, you know, apparently bop beats from the Russian Federation and Soviet Union and beyond, one of the it actually was an American-style 18-wheeler, which is actually one of the most interesting things. It almost looked like a Cascadia. But beyond that, we could see the burning trailer, one of the burning trailers with the container boxes on the back after the attack. It appears that after the attack, every single container was rigged to self-destruct itself and also burn pretty much every single piece of evidence that could be left behind. But we can see here this driver passing by the debris fields that existed from these container boxes that self-destructed after the attack had ended at Belaya airbase.
You know what's kind of interesting, though, is Ukraine actually published pictures, and also some other sources published pictures as well of exactly how those boxes were built and how they functioned. So I'm not sure what the effect behind actually destroying the truck and the trailer was in reality, because they voluntarily showed how it works. So I think it might have been maybe for a dramatic effect they blew it up to make it seem more spy-like, because I don't really understand the purpose behind doing that.
I don't really understand much of the purpose behind it either, but I suppose maybe there was some sort of sensitive like cradle system or launch system that was able to track its distance on GPS without the use of a GPS system, maybe, and they wanted to destroy that, possibly. But we did also get to see the drones flying over the citizens on their 4-mile flight of glory here as they were launched from the trucks and making their way to the airbase, just to show y'all some of the views that the citizens got of this historic moment. And there goes one of the drones, already over to Belaya airbase, where we can already see a major mushroom cloud rising from another impact that had just been made a little bit before the clip.
Смотри, что творится, я не знаю даже, что это сейчас взорвалось.
What's even more shocking is the view from the actual motorway itself that was only passing by a couple of miles away, as one citizen filmed what was going on at the airbase, and it quite literally looked like an apocalypse was happening at the airfield. We were able to see at least 5 individual plumes of smoke coming from the airbase, once again showing us major damage had been caused not only to the aircraft, but it appears to some adjacent facilities as well. This attack was significant, but what is even more shocking about it is that it happened in the middle of Siberia, making this the first attack in the entirety of the war of any type that has ever happened inside of Siberia. And what is even more shocking is that it was only one of the 5 attacks that happened today, and every other attack was the exact same size and severity as the attack that occurred at Belaya Air Base inside of the Irkutsk region. And that is where we need to get into a little bit of a storytelling thing before I get you all into the next ones. This has been 18 months in the planning, according to the Ukrainian SBU, which published a lot of information about this today. And as a matter of fact, the entire thing didn't originate inside of Ukraine, with the production of the container boxes, the drones, and the actual attack plans. All of it was done inside of the Russian Federation. And what is even more shocking is that it happened right in the Russian Federation's noses. While Russian government over the past week and a half aircraft had been conducting an exodus from the city of Moscow and traveling into the area of Yekaterinburg and Chelyabinsk, in that very same area, right next door, across the street from the Russian FSB building in Chelyabinsk, was a small little storage area, sort of a industrial building. And inside of that industrial building, Ukrainian SBU forces were hard at work the entire time building these specialized container boxes and filling them with the cradles with the drones inside. This has been going on.
Isn't it crazy how it's kind of a little bit primitive looking? Like, I was trying to study it earlier when I saw these pictures. It's just basically a false compartment made of plywood and 2x4s where drones are just sort of cradled into certain spots in a row with a metal covering on it. It's honestly ingenious and super simple to the point where it's like, why didn't they think of that or do this sooner than now? Because it's so ingenious. Like, really, it's on the level, like I said in the short war video today, of what Israel did with the pager operation with Hezbollah. It's on the same level of ingenuity.
And also, holy smokes, Brittany Tan's just thrown in $1,000.
Holy crap.
Holy moly. We are
crazy.
actually at $2,400 right now on the fundraiser. We're only $120 away from the goal. And a huge shout out to Brittany Taz for supporting Nova Ukraine and the amazing work that they do. That is massive support, and literally about half of the funds raised so far in the fundraiser tonight. That's absolutely crazy. But getting on back into this, which is absolutely crazy, is that this is quite primitive, but still, it's being done inside of a Russian industrial building, which I'm not even kidding. It's literally right next door to the FSB headquarters in the city of Chelyabinsk. So pretty much the Ukrainian version of the CIA was building and constructing and planning the largest attack that we've ever seen on a bomber force in history, right next door to the Russian version of the CIA, and they're both across the street from each other.
And you know what's even worse than that is when the Russian government evacuated a few days back and they sent all these commercial flights out of Moscow to get the people away from the drone danger, they literally flew the Russian politicians and the government decision makers straight over to Chelyabinsk, where the Ukrainian saboteurs were operating right next to the security building, and they sent them right there where the Ukrainians were actually building this whole thing, literally to save the Russian politicians. They sent them right to the Ukrainians in Chelyabinsk, which is crazy.
It actually is absolutely crazy because the same FSB headquarters that is in Chelyabinsk was most likely charged with the responsibility of protecting any of the Russian government officials that were landing in Yekaterinburg, or specifically the city of Chelyabinsk, which is the one where this entire operation was being constructed the whole time. The pictures actually show that this was quite a significant operation, and it appears that it was all done inside of this one industrial building. They built every single container, which was specialized, and they also built these special hatches so that way the drones could be launched when they got into position. The plan is absolutely genius, and we can also see all of the drones here actually apparently being also made on site and then placed inside of the shipping containers, waiting for their moment to be launched, which was today. This attack was not only a major a major embarrassment to the FSB, but seriously damaged and crippled the entirety of the Russian Federation's ability to actually stand off the West or even Ukraine during their ongoing attacks. Russian bombers have always posed a significant threat to Ukraine's skies throughout the entirety of the war, and it also appears that we had just hit goal. Hey!
We smashed the goal. Look at that. We smashed it in what, like 20 minutes or something? That's crazy. That's super early. That is crazy.
Absolutely crazy. I got to give a huge shout out to all of y'all because we just hit the goal on the fundraiser. A lot like the Ukrainians hit the goal on all those Russian bombers today. Hey, that's actually pretty impressive right there. And I got to give a huge thanks and a shout out to everyone in the LSA who supported the fundraiser tonight, because Nova Ukraine is going to be getting that to good use and making sure to help out the Ukrainian citizenry down there on the ground. So a big shout out to everyone who just hit that fundraiser goal. Really impressive. And moving on into our next bit of news, I also got to add in this. Right when the attacks were going on, and a couple of hours later, after the Ukrainians put out the pictures, the FSB walked across the street and raided the warehouse, which had already been abandoned by the Ukrainians. And we could see the presence of the FSB literally right across the street from the headquarters, and these pictures right here. And they're now going inside of the building. You can actually see some of the main elements that we saw in the last pictures from the outside. Let me show that to y'all here really quickly. Y'all see the outline of this building, or at least its structure? Y'all can see that this is literally the exact same shape and warehouse building that was being used by the Ukrainians. A really wild
insane.
And crazy
like,
thing.
Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy? And also, they try to show up after the fact. Like, the FSB tries to show up. It was literally being built right next to their security building for the FSB. Now they show up after the fact and act like they were on top of it. It's insane. It's like, it's the worst type of covering your tracks when it comes to incompetence that the Russians could possibly do at this point.
It's absolutely an embarrassment for them, especially considering that it was literally done right next door. Zelenskyy has gone out of his way today to make sure to add a little bit of salt to the wound, at least for the FSB. We were able to hear that apparently the entire time this was going on for 18 months, that Zelenskyy personally oversaw the planning of the operation targeting the Russian military airports that we saw today. And not only that, he also clowned on the FSB a little bit, stating that the office of Ukraine's operation on Russian territory was located right next door to the office of the FSB, and we know now that that was actually inside of Chelyabinsk. That building has been long since abandoned. The FSB is now raiding an empty building. There are no Ukrainian operatives. There's not even a shred of evidence left behind in that building, from what we've been able to hear, of their continued planning and operation and construction of the entire attack that happened today. So the FSB has quite literally is about 2 steps behind the Ukrainian SBU on being able to plan and coordinate and conduct these sorts of attacks. But let me go to show y'all the rest of the major attacks that have happened. And before we get into all of the other airbase attacks, I want to bring y'all up to the other one, at least in a different criteria from our current attacks, that happened up inside of Murmansk. But also, a lot of people have been pointing out, before we get into the rest of this, that Ukraine has destroyed over 34% of Russia's nuclear strategic bomber fleet. And a lot of people are wondering, how will Putin largely respond? From what we understand, a decent amount of people are saying that Putin's most likely going to move forward with striking Kyiv's decision-making centers, meaning their governmental offices and buildings. Some others are saying that he's going to start much larger offensives, which the Russians may not really be able to do due to a lack of resources and equipment. Others are saying that they're unsure and undecided. And some people, a very small amount, are saying that he's going to double down on peace talks, which I'd have to say is highly unlikely. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So 48%, the most popular option. 48% of the audience said that they were going to strike key decision-making centers in response to this major attack on the bomber fleet today, while 36% of the audience said they're going to start striking and also causing much larger offensives inside of Ukraine, and 5% said that they're going to double down on the peace talks with the U.S. government and Ukraine as well. Now, one thing that is a bit weird is Russia is moving forward with the peace talks in Istanbul. And once again, they're not really peace talks. It's more of like stalling talks because they're not really looking for peace. They keep basically demanding Ukraine to surrender. And that's not a peace talk. So they're doing it for the show of it. And they're trying to, I guess, manipulate the United States. I guess is what they're trying to do with that. So they're doubling down, but it's not on the right thing. So it's not really peace talks. Me personally, I think the risk of pulling off an operation of this nature and how severe this was toward the Russian military, that Russia's probably going to strike the key decision-making centers. That probably is coming up. They're going to at least try to do that. Now, whether or not Russia can pull it off, that's an entirely different thing on its own because, of course, they do have Patriots protecting Kyiv. They have a lot of air defense, and also they have a very, very active military presence around that area. Of course, it's the capital. So unless he launched an Oreshnik or something of that nature at Kyiv, I really doubt they can cause as much damage as they'd want to cause in this major retaliation that Putin's trying to propose right now. So I'm with the 48%. I think they probably will try to do that in the coming days. Probably not immediately in the next 24 hours, but probably in the coming days. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, in my opinion, I believe that this is most likely going to lead to significant drone strikes by the Russian Federation, most likely ranging in the hundreds if they have the supplies over the next weeks, because they are going to be trying to get every single shred of vengeance that they can for the significant loss of 34% of the bomber fleet. The loss of the bomber fleet today has been a major blow to the Russian Federation's strategic standoff capabilities. And while strategic bombers do not have the kind of importance that they did in, say, the Second World War, where they would fly over cities in the hundreds and carpet bomb the entire area, in the modern day, they fill as important a role as they did back then, firing off standoff weapons at a considerable range at enemy targets, pretty much being a glorified massive missile carrier in the skies. The fact that the Russians lost 34 to 35% of them is going to be leading us to believe that the Russian Federation not only has lost a major part of their strategic deterrence at a conventional and nuclear level, but they've also lost a major part of their pride today for the great deal of it, because many Russians have been saying that this is their version of Pearl Harbor. It's that bad in their mind, and it's that shocking of an upset that it is their equivalent of Pearl Harbor in their mind. So I have a feeling the Russians are probably going to be going out for blood, and they're most likely going to be striking key decision centers inside of Ukraine to try and get back at the Ukrainians any way they can. Nevertheless, though, we are going to be moving on to the rest of the news that we have tonight, and that's going to be bringing us on up into Murmansk, where we were able to hear of something that was even more interesting and as significant as the airfield attacks, which occurred near the area of Severomorsk. Severomorsk is a closed city in the Russian Federation. It's a little bit special in that way because this city actually houses the Russian nuclear submarine fleet, which we can actually find if we look around enough. And for some reason here, I'm having a hard time finding it. But let me see if I can gander around here, because it should be in this area. I've looked at it before, and there's no way that I'm not seeing this. It's around here. It's around Severomorsk, but for some reason I'm not seeing any submarines, at least at this moment. Hold up. Wait a minute. Maybe I'm not seeing them because I'm not looking at the piers in the proper location. And I wish I had geolocated this one a little bit better, because this entire area is considered to be a part of the nuclear submarine base, but for some odd reason, I'm not seeing the nuclear submarines moored at their open posts. So let me see.
Don't they have sub pens around this base? Like they keep some of their subs like under the coverings of a sub like tunnel?
They do in some areas, but there's also kind of an exposed area, a mooring where the submarines can also be, kind of like the Vostochny Rayon down in the area of Novorossiysk, and I'm currently not seeing any of them, at least on satellite here. But I can confirm to y'all, and we could pull it up if we need to, that it, oh, wait a minute, well, there's one of them, right there. Finally, I found one. This is a submarine base, though, the entirety of it is, and this is used for Russian nuclear submarine operations. Further on down in the city of Murmansk, there's a decent amount of larger Russian Navy vessels, which you can find further down the way. You can find some Russian Navy auxiliaries moored along the side of the river, and I believe if we move far enough down or up, we could actually find the Admiral's Kuznetsov, which is the only aircraft carrier they have, still undergoing refit after the entirety of the... Oh, here it is, actually. there's the Admiral Kuznetsov Rust Bucket Canteen and aircraft carrier right there. So there it is. That's also a part of, I believe, the Arctic Fleet, if I'm correct. But beyond that, this is the nuclear submarine base. I want to make sure that we were able to lay that out before we got into this. Nevertheless, we were able to see that there were massive explosions and fires occurring at this base today. This footage was geolocated in Severomorsk and is showing the area looking northwest towards the region of the port where the submarines are based at.
Sounds like something's cooking off, like maybe ammo or something.
Jesse, we have to cook Russian submarines. Yes, science, bitch, or whatever that guy was saying in Breaking Bad.
Cook. Honestly, I don't know what's cooking, but it sounds like it's munitions, at least to me.
It sounds like something is cooking very heavily down the way at the actual port. But we can see it in this clip right here as well.
So was it an attack or was it just something exploding? Because I couldn't figure that out earlier. That was sort of up for debate.
We don't really know. Like we know that the base is exploding or something significant is exploding on the base, but beyond that we don't really know what caused the explosion. So it could be a Ukrainian attack, it could have been just a act of incompetence, it could be sabotage, it could be anything at this point. We just know that the base did blow up, however, and it appears to have suffered a decent amount of damage.
Interesting. Yeah, it seemed like it to me. I couldn't tell earlier because we didn't get reports of drones coming into that area, so I was a little bit confused whether or not it was just a Blyatman accident, maybe with a Lucky Strike cigarette and they blew something up by accident, or maybe it was a targeted attack. It seems that Russia's experiencing a lot of spontaneous explosions on railway bridges, also their sub base here. It seems a little coincidental, but also it is possible that maybe it was just an accident.
Also, we do have to move down to this air base as well. I had to make sure to label them with their names because there's so many of them we have to cover. I wanted to make sure to get to this as well. Just a little bit of ways away from the nuclear submarine pens and also pretty much the headquarters of the Northern Fleet or the Arctic Fleet of the Russian Federation is the Olenya Air Base, which is right here. And you can actually see on its tarmac as well, it houses a decent amount of Tu-95s, Antonov 22s, a decent amount of aircraft that the Russian Federation would consider to be strategically valuable assets. But most importantly, if you look around here, that is a hell of a lot of Tu-22M3s. That actually would be quite a large number of Tu-22M3s, and from what we're able to tell, they're all operational. And some people would be going, why would you think they're operational? Well, here's why. Every single Russian aircraft that is operational, that is the size of a strategic bomber, that is sitting on the tarmac of a Russian runway, and it's not soon to take flight, they cover them in tires. I don't know why. Like, I know many people are going to be like, why did they cover them in tires? I have no clue why they do that. We haven't really known that the entirety of the war. They started to do that about a year in, and they've been doing it since. It's just an age-old tradition. It doesn't really provide any defensive value from any kind of an attack, and it doesn't obscure the aircraft from the vision of satellite, so I don't really know what kind of a purpose these tires are serving at all, and we've never really been able to get a good answer to that. But we know that any active Russian aircraft that's just sitting around on the tarmac, they're going to be loaded up with tires. I guess they say, if you're going to be getting in a dangerous situation, always wear protection. And the Russians, damn it, they're putting rubbers on the bombers because they're going to make sure that they're protected. But it didn't appear to protect them too well. It appears there may have been some holes in the rubber, to put it that way, because we were able to see that there was a very significant fire coming from Olenya Air Base. You could see it right there, the full scale of it at least, and it appears that the whole air base was on fire.
Oh dear. That's a big one.
That is a huge one. And we even hear the sound of drones outside. Or at least some sort of an air raid siren, possibly. But moving into our next clip, we got to actually see clips from Olenya itself, and it was some very interesting clips, I'd have to say. First off, we did get to see a myriad of clips coming from the area of Olenya Air Base from citizens and soldiers alike, showing the attack that was occurring at the airfield. We can see the smoke covering the nearby town. This town, actually, that these videos are being filmed from is Olenegorsk, which is right next to these major open pit mines, which is a big industry for the city. It's really their only industry. You see them having to get out of their commie block to take a better look at this.
The commie block sure is close to the airbase. It's like basically right on it.
Yeah, it's not far away. The only thing that divides them is this little lake right here in between Olenegorsk and the airbase itself. But moving into our next clip, we even got to see someone who was miles away on a hill. We're not really sure where this hill was. It could have been further west, which would make sense, or it could have been further east as well, somewhere here into the southeast, because there are mountains and hills throughout the surrounding area. But beyond that, we were able to see that they were also filming it as well.
О, Господи, еще раз, девочки, еще.
I don't know what that noise was, but we'll just overlook that. And moving on into our next clip, we also get to see here another view of the burning fires from the bombers that were being destroyed at the airbase.
Is that Soviet propaganda I hear out in the distance?
Russians, Putin has not abandoned you. The smoke is only from a large bonfire to celebrate the greatness of our glorious government of the Российской Федерации. Блядь.
But anyways,
Lies. I say it's lies.
it is all lies. Oh, this was actually filmed by a Russian railway worker, because you could see that he turned around and apparently he's standing near to some kind of a gondola for a freight car, something along those lines. Very interesting to know. But anyways, we could also see here a very simplified rendering of the Olenya airbase as it's being seen right there. That's the airbase that was being attacked, and when we lined them up, that's the exact same airbase that we have right here, including the major cut that's been made in the trees for what would appear to be high voltage lines, which we can see just a little bit of. Beyond that, however, we have even more clips of the Olenya airbase hit. We were able to see that the drones were actually targeting the weak spots of these aircraft, which was a very interesting fact to know. Take a gander at this. This drone flies directly over the Tu-95, lines up right here, which is actually very interesting because that area right there is where the internal wing fuel tank is, and it's lining up exactly with it, and it's going to fly right into that specific spot and hit it to cause the most significant fire it can. And there it goes into its dive. It's gently bringing itself on down. And right on top of the fuel tank. And a lot
Very
of people,
precise, actually. I heard they trained it using like pictures from like a historical museum or something like that.
they actually did. That's actually a fairly interesting thing that we're about to get to here in a second. And we also got to see one more clip showing the explosions and fires at the airbase. It's pretty much the same one we saw from miles away, but it's a little bit longer by about 20 seconds, but the same thing. Still, we were able to confirm that Olenya Air Base took some significant hits, and according to the Ukrainian Armed Forces, or the SBU for the large part, they were able to confirm that a significant amount of Russian bombers were targeted and destroyed at this base. But that also brings in the question to folks, what in the world was going on with this? How in the world were these drones that accurate? And how in the world did they have connection to an operator that was able to know exactly where the weak points of every single bomber was and to target those specific weak points? And while we're asking that question, I'll show you here the Russian truck that delivered, well, actually, this was once again located to the Irkutsk Oblast. This is part of the Belaya airfield attack, but you can't see another one of the burning containers that was used for the attack. But it begs the question, what in the world, how in the world did the Ukrainians pull off such a coordinated attack on so many airfields, hitting the exact same spot with the exact same precision to be able to destroy all these things? And the answer is, shockingly and scarily enough, AI. The Ukrainians trained their drones on targeting Russian bombers by bringing them to the Poltava Museum of Long-Range and Strategic Aviation. And here at this museum,
They just brought them there? Like, they just, like, took the drones with them and said, hey, you know, have a look at this. Like, they took the drone around like a museum tour and said, we want you to destroy these later. And the drone said, uh-huh.
Apparently they did. From what we're able to know, apparently they brought one drone around and allowed it to fly around so that way they could somehow allow for the AI program to identify the specific shapes and styles of bomber that were to be targeted and also be able to go after its weak spots. But you can actually see a picture here of the museum in Poltava, and here is the original version of the Tu-22, which is a real piece of shit, and then the Tu-22M3, which is the modified version, the Tu-160 Blackjack, as well as the Tu-95, and also a couple of other rotary aircraft and fixed wings that were not targeted in the attack. Beyond that, though, this is actually where they trained those Ukrainian drones what to strike was on these aircraft specifically. And so the AI learned, it developed, it evolved. And so then they took the programming that was taken from those drones and they added it into every single drone that was involved in the attack so that way they would know every single bomber to fly over to that bomber if they visually were able to see it on the camera for those drones, line up directly with the weakest spot where the most easily accessible fuel tanks were, and then to slam down right onto that location to try and destroy the aircraft as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So this is the first entirely AI-based attack that we have ever seen in human history, and only occurred a few years after AI was largely introduced into the wild at large in the world. It's a wildly
Pretty
interesting
advanced.
thing.
Honestly, it's pretty advanced. Like, that's really ingenuitive by Ukraine for them to be the first to do that. Ukraine's been the first to a lot of stuff in warfare, which they've had to do by necessity. Like the first to use drones properly in a warfare setting like that, and then Russia adapted to it. Now they're doing AI training on the drones. Like, really, the advancements they're making are advancements that the United States is currently developing right now, but they're doing it in real time and actually using it on a real situation, like in real time. They're literally testing it on the ground, which is just wild to see. And also to think that they're using like history, like they're taking the drone and training the AI on museum pieces. Now, I would have never thought in a million years that you could even remotely do that. That's just incredible.
And you know, Matthew, it always proves to show that people ought to put a lot of funding in their local museums, because you never know, one day there might be an AI operated drone that is training on the very things in that museum to be able to target and destroy the enemies of the state. It's a very important thing to remember,
Well,
folks.
it only works on Russia though, because they're the only ones that use stuff that's like 100 years old, like, or 60 years old or something. Just like, that's the disadvantage of using old equipment, is everybody has a chance to look at it because it's literally museum pieces at that point. So I think the moral of the story should be like, use modern equipment, unlike Russia, who has nothing new.
That's pretty true. And honestly, the Russians are well behind on that. But beyond that, we also have a big question for y'all. Because just hours ago, returning back up into the Murmansk area and at the specific city of Severomorsk, we were able to see that explosions were reported at Russia's nuclear subbase near to Murmansk. And a lot of people are wondering, was it targeted? And it seems as though everyone's saying that it was likely targeted. Others are saying that they need more info on it. Some are saying it was just an explosion and that was it. And others are unsure and undecided. But Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about it as well?
So it looks like 80% of the audience said yes, it was likely targeted probably by Ukraine, this nuclear subbase that was near to Murmansk, while 11% said we need more info, and 3% said no, it was just an explosion. And honestly, on this one, it's a little bit of a close call. I'm actually going to be with the 11% that said we need more info, because we didn't actually hear any information about drones heading that direction. We didn't hear any information about Ukrainian tanks launched in that direction, but we did see, obviously, on camera a massive explosion and apparently the cooking off of some type of munitions in the background. So it seems like an attack. It looks and smells like an attack. But at the same time, though, we don't have any corroborating evidence to say that it certainly was an attack. So I'm not really sure. It could have just been an explosion, a careless worker at the sub base. But, you know, things happen with the Russians that are a little bit weird. So you wouldn't think they would smoke around it. But it's possible that they could have and set it on fire. So I'm going to be with the 11%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'm going to have to be with the 11% as well. There's just not enough info to say discernibly what exactly happened at Severomorsk. The Ukrainian SBU has not taken responsibility for the attack, and considering that out of the day's events, that actually would be the smaller scale attack that did occur, I would believe that the Ukrainians would easily take credit for that if it was a direct attack of theirs that hit Severomorsk. However, we've never seen that confirmation. That's leading me to believe that there is a decent probability that this could have been some sort of a significant ammunition accident, or maybe even an act of sabotage by an independent actor, a third-party actor outside of Ukraine or Russia that simply wanted to try and destroy the facility in the midst of the chaos. That may have also been a possibility as well. So I would have to say that I'm going to be with the 11%, and while a lot of people are wanting to say that this was a significant attack on a Russian nuclear submarine base by the Ukrainians, I just don't think that we have enough proof to be able to confirm that. But moving on back into everything that we have so far on the airbase attacks, because if y'all thought we were over just covering Belaya and the airbase at here at Olenya, near to the area of Olenegorsk, you're actually quite mistaken. We still have about 3 different airports to cover still. So moving us on down into the area of Ivanovo, we also got to see more attacks being conducted. Well, we'll actually get to this one here in a second. But moving on into Ivanovo, we also got to see here the drones flying on in. There they go. on their little flight of glory there. Every single drone, I'm saying that they were on their little flight of glory today, because that's pretty much what they were doing. We even got to see this Russian soldier on the ground at Ivanovo, actually confirming that the Russian strategic bombers were on fire. Would you look at that?
Shouldn't he be like trying to defend the sky, like shooting at the drones or something? Why is he filming and like sitting at a picnic table or something?
Dude, he's this world's version of like Foozy Tube for Russia. He's Bliata Tube, and he's like, "Yo, on God, look, I'm like Drake," and then he like turns the camera around and he's showing like burning bombers and stuff. That's pretty much him. But still, there's the still picture right there of what he turned around and saw. So we can confirm that there were multiple Tu-95s that were also destroyed here at Ivanovo. Well, let me go show y'all where the Ivanovo base was, because this one was the more fun one of them all. It was the closest to an urban area. Here it is. And you can already see that there was a significant airlift wing of IL-76s that were based here. And also, from what we could tell, there wasn't just IL-76s during that time. There was also strategic bombers that were at the airbase as well. Specifically, some Tu-95s, but you know something else that's more you know what? We'll get to that here in a second. I don't want to spoil the surprise. Stick around, folks. I'm going to build you all up to the big surprise here in a second. So, we did get to confirm once again that Ivanovo was hit hard. And now it's time for me to tell you all the surprise. There was a strike today at Ivanovo. And if y'all look at this airfield here, it's very interesting to note that a lot of the aircraft here are based off the IL-76 platform, which is not a bomber. It's actually a support aircraft or a transport aircraft for the large part that was produced during the times of the Soviet Union and still largely produced to this day inside the Russian Federation. There's a picture of one right there. But there is a very interesting variant of this aircraft that's incredibly important for Russian air war operations, much like the comparable variant in the U.S. is important to our air operations, which is the Beriev A-50. This is an IL-76 that was modified into an AWACS aircraft, meaning that it serves as a mobile flying command post for air operations, and not only that, the giant radar boom on top of the aircraft is able to identify air targets from hundreds of miles away, and allows for the operators on board the aircraft to coordinate with friendly air forces. They'll be able to target and destroy and properly allocate their available air resources to areas where they would need it the most to fight enemy targets. The Russians, as far as we understood, after giving away an A-50 to North Korea about a month ago, only had one of these left. And you can actually see this little happy reunion here of all these rotting A-50s on the tarmac, which are no longer operational, right here. But these aircraft had not been operational for years, and out of the Russian Air Force's real operational capacity, at the beginning of the Ukraine war, they had 5. 3 of them got shot down over the past few years. There were only 2 left, and one was given away to North Korea about a month and a half ago. Today, we were able to hear that apparently the A-50 at the Ivanovo Air Base, the last operational one that the Russian Federation had, was apparently targeted and possibly destroyed in the attack. We have not been able to get video and picture evidence from the ground, but we have been able to hear that there is a decent amount of confirmation coming forward that it appears that the A-50 was destroyed. We will be waiting for actual picture and video evidence to be able to confirm that, but if that is the case and this information is accurate, that means that the Russian Federation lost one of the most important air assets that they have remaining in the Air Force. These aircraft are vitally important to any modern Air Force to be able to conduct any kind of modern air operations. If they lost their A-50, they have lost their literal eyes in the sky to be able to get the one-up on everyone else in air combat, meaning that they're going to have to start reverting, funnily enough, while the North Koreans are advancing their air doctrine to a slightly modern Russian air doctrine, the Russians are going to have to be regressing into North Korean-style air doctrine because of the loss of their AWACS aircraft completely and the complete extinction of that class inside the Russian Air Force. So that will be a pretty significant thing to find out later. Moving on from that and on down into some of our general overview news, we were able to confirm that 34% of the bombers were knocked out, equivaling about $7 billion of losses of Russian aircraft today. And I want to remind y'all that that's not cheap. If y'all want to get an idea of how much $7 billion is, that is actually the cost of a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier, which is this ship right here. So the Russians,
yes, Russia could use one of those for sure. They could definitely use one of those. $7 billion for Russia, that's a lot of money for them at this point.
For us, that's just chunk change. For the Russians, $7 billion is irreplaceable losses at this point. There's no way you could ever replace those kinds of significant money figure losses. But beyond that, we also were able to hear not only that, But the Russian Federation is also claiming that these were the list of air bases that were attacked, along with the SBU. The airbase Belaya, Diegelovo, Olenya, and Ivanovo, which we were able to get footage from all 4 of those attacks throughout the course of the day. And we're now going to be moving on down into our next clips, where we were able to see one of the attacks that was occurring somewhere around Vokrsensk. These clips were spread out over a wide area because there was a little bit of an issue here. I was never able to find the Vokrsensk air base. I tried to pull it up as much as I can, and it was confirmed time and time again by multiple sources that the Vokrsensk airfield was targeted and hit within the Moscow Oblast. And when I found Vokrsensk, the only airfield I could find was this very small civilian airfield that quite obviously is not being used by the Russian military. So that led me with a problem. Where the hell was the Vokrsensk airbase? I looked high and low to be able to try and find this thing, and I just could not find an airbase that was close to the area of Vokrsensk. Quite literally nowhere around. And I went all the way north to the Zhukovsky and Domodedovo airports, and there was no military airbase found within that area, or even all the way down to Kolomna itself, which we would largely consider to be pretty much the extent of an area, a geographical area that would be around Vokrsensk. So there was a little bit of an issue. The only military-ish base that I could find that may be in operation was this one, but once again, this appears to be a manufacturing facility for MiG. At least from what I could tell. And it doesn't even appear that it's been operational for a while. So, still, that left us with a dead lead. Now, there is, however, a military air base in Ryazan. And this was the closest one that I could find that was near to the area. And I wanted to make sure to explain that really quickly, because that's why the markers are literally spread out all the way from Vokrsensk down to Ryazan, is because the only airfield I could find that fit the description was near Ryazan. I could not find one around Vokrsensk that was being used as a military airfield. And if it was the Vokrsensk airfield and they were talking about Zhukovsky or Domodedovo, it would have been listed as a Moscow air base, which would be Zhukovsky or Domodedovo, and those aren't even military air bases, those are commercial aviation airports. So with that in mind, that kind of explains why we have a little bit of an issue, or at least a little bit of a difficulty geolocating that specific airfield. Nevertheless, we did get to confirm that this was one of the air bases that was attacked, as we were able to see smoke rising from the area, once again showing another major hit being conducted by Ukrainian forces.
Kind of crazy that Ukraine would follow up with such a large attack on Moscow again, considering that's caused a hell of a lot of response from the Kremlin right after conducting like the world's most unprecedented attack on all these different air bases. It seems like they're trying to really overwhelm the Kremlin's decision-making centers and things like that.
It really does seem so. And not only that, we also got to see that apparently some Russians, at least in this attack, tried to stop it. They started climbing up on top of the trucks with the drones that were being launched, and were trying to cover them with like rocks or tarps or anything to be able to stop the drones from taking off and going on their flight of glory over there to the Russian air bases. We see them running around here on the outsides of the vehicles.
They're feeding Ivan rocks to throw at the drones.
Here is Big Stan. Throw at the drone.
He got 2 in his hand and said, "I wish I had these."
We see the airbase on fire right over there for a quick second, as all these Russians are running around trying to stop the attack.
That's the first time I've ever seen Russians actually work together effectively like this. They're kind of like actually accomplishing something here a little bit.
A little bit. It looks like someone tried to throw up a rock and they missed. We see them continuing to toss up rocks. And that's the end of that clip. But still, very interesting to note that they were trying to do that. We also got to see that later, that very truck appears to have tried to leave the area, but burned down to the ground. And we can see that right here as well. One of the containers completely blew out, and the other one appears to be largely intact, still on the trailer. Moving on from those clips and out of the Ryazan area, it's now time for us to move down to Lipetsk, which was also one of the areas that had an airfield that was targeted. Let me get y'all down to Lipetsk real quick. Here's Lipetsk, and this is the airbase that we were able to confirm was the one that was attacked. And, oh by golly, the amount of equipment that was here was insane. Look at this.
Dang, that's a lot. Also, what was those special liveries for? Was that like some type of like aerial aerobatics unit or something?
It appears to be retired aerobatic aircraft, because some of them have had their wings stripped.
Interesting. Yeah, it's like a boneyard slash like functioning like airstrip. It's kind of odd.
Yeah, it is. It's incredibly odd. But up here, this is where we generally believe that any of the strategic bombers would have been held, because this appears to be the operational area of the airport that isn't being used as a boneyard like this area of the airfield is. But it appears that there was also some strategic bombers that were being based here, and we also were able to see other attacks being conducted within this area, as we were once again able to see more of the drones taking off. Actually, this is the clip. Sorry, everyone. This actually was mislocated. This is the one that happened out in Irkutsk, and we were able to confirm that a great deal. We also get to see out here one of the trucks did disassemble it. Actually, that's another duplicate right there. Let me just get rid of that one as well. It's really hard to keep them in track because we had about 60 different news bulletins tonight. But we were able to see here in this clip one of the attacks that was ongoing on Lipetsk. I don't know what that was.
That was a loogie.
It's a trombone.
Oh dear, it was a lawnmower.
Dude, the Ukrainian said, "You like jazz?" and then hit him. But we also got to see the attack on the airfield from this angle as well. That watermark is obnoxious. But that's the end of the clip. But still, very interesting to see. Moving on out of all of this, though, that is every single bit of information that I was able to get today, so far, on all the attacks and the explosion that occurred at the Russian nuclear submarine base and the airfield. So, as y'all can tell, it was quite a lot. It took us about 50 minutes to get through all of it, and also make sure that it was all geolocated accurately. And it is quite the attack. It's quite literally history in the making. We've never seen an attack like this before in history. We may see that attacks like this become quite common throughout the rest of history, or at least through this era. It's just an insane thing to see, and it appears that a lot of people are saying that it seems that things are going to be changing a lot in the world, at least in Russia for now, as Ukraine says that the office of the secret drone operation was right next door to the Russian FSB office, and a lot of people have been putting in their thoughts on that, and that's not an exaggeration, that's quite literally the truth. We were able to confirm where that was in Chelyabinsk, and it was quite literally next door to the FSB building. And a lot of people have been saying that this seems to be the catalyst for the Russians descending into a complete lockdown of the country. Others are saying that the Russians will just move on normally because there's not really too much that they could do. And some people are saying that paranoia will set in, but slowly. But it seems as though the majority of people are believing that this is going to end up pretty badly for either the Russian psyche or how the Russian government is going to operate throughout the rest of the war. But Matthew, what are people thinking, and what are you thinking as well?
So about 37%, the most popular option here, was that Russia will descend into a lockdown because now they're scared of every semi-truck that's driving on any Russian road anywhere, while 32% said paranoia will set in, but only slowly, while 24% said Russia will simply move on normally and try to ignore it. Now, one thing, Putin has been notorious throughout this entire war for getting more and more paranoid about literally everything. And now the Russian citizens are about to engage in the exact same paranoia because now they know that there's trucks roaming their roads that could potentially be filled with drone attacks. And just like these, they could be fake semi-truck trailers carrying a bunch of weapons that could go off at any moment. So now that Ukraine's proven they have the ability to pull this off, paranoia is going to set in instantly. I think this is going to cause Russia to descend into some form of a soft lockdown and also a lot of checkpoints for a lot of different trucks that are going down their roads. And honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if it was much more severe than that. But I think it certainly is going that direction because naturally they can't trust anything anymore. They're going to be paranoid about your average box truck delivering food. They're going to be paranoid about your average cargo truck. It's going to be a bit of a mess because now Ukraine's created a lot of doubt about the safety of the roads. And also they've made a mockery out of the FSB because it was literally done right under their noses next door. When they would go out to go get lunch every day, they were passing right by the people they're supposed to be targeting and investigating, and they didn't even see them. That's how bad it is. So I'm with the 37%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that I'm with the 37% as well. This is mostly going to send Russia into being, which it already is, a police state, but it's going to end up becoming a draconian police state of a 1984 style from the book from let's see, what was it, Matthew? Orson Welles?
George Orwell?
George Orwell, yeah, that's who it is. Orson Welles was the other guy who made War of the Worlds or whatever. No, Orson Welles was the guy who did the who did the French. He was the guy who did that. Sorry, everyone. Sorry, I forgot their names. But beyond that, the Russians are going to be descending into a draconian lockdown. There is no way for them to be able to confirm what is inside of each truck. And we do have to remember that this is the second time that a major attack has been conducted using an 18-wheeler from Ukraine. Because y'all remember, the first ever attack on the Crimean bridge was actually done with an 18-wheeler carrying a load of explosives, and then it just blew up on the bridge and knocked it out. So it's highly likely that this could just end up resulting in the Russians becoming extremely draconian on inspecting every single thing that's being transported by truck in Russia. And not only that, it may also make them incredibly draconian about operating any kind of drones that are not operated by the military, along with a whole bunch of other things as well. But it is quite obvious at this point to me, many things are going to be changing in Russia, because this quite truly was Russia's Pearl Harbor today, with the amount of losses that they took and the kind of shock it was. But anyways, moving on from that and into the rest of our news, having to keep a rapid fire pace tonight, folks, because we still have an insanely high amount of news just from today, and I'm also wanting to include a little bit from yesterday, because I didn't really get to give y'all a good shot at even covering the news at all yesterday, because we had some business stuff that we had to attend to, and we thought it was going to be completed right when we went live, and then it wasn't, so we had to stop the whole thing and then go tend to that, because it had to quite literally be dealt with that day. So I didn't get to cover anything of what we had yesterday, which was also a lot. As you can tell right there, it was quite a good bit. But moving on from that and into the area of Bryansk, I will show you all a little bit of this news from yesterday. A railway bridge collapsed due to being blown up. This is not the first time that we saw this. This is actually one of the few that happened over the past 2 days for the large part. But from what we know, some sort of partisans or something along those lines planted bombs on a railway bridge and blew it up, and funnily enough, it got blown up right when a passenger train was passing under it, so dozens were injured and several were killed. We actually were able to see this from this angle here, showing us the train after it collapsed off of the bridge. Y'all wouldn't believe it, folks. I'm into trains a good bit, and somehow we finally got trains in the news. Can y'all believe that? Like, it's actual news to cover, which is a little bit wild. But beyond that, we did also get to see the controlled demo, the remainder of the bridge that had not been collapsed in the explosion from last night, which we can see right here.
Was that a demolition?
Yeah, it's a controlled demolition.
Interesting.
Because the bridge is gone, so why not just blow the whole damn thing up? Meanwhile, further down in Kursk, we also got to see another bridge collapse happen in Kursk. This one was quite dramatic, because it actually happened right under the engines. You can actually see that the engine's electrical drives, or at least their actual wheelbases, separated from the bottom of the engines themselves because of how violent the explosion and jarring of the locomotives on the rails were. And it's actually a very interesting thing. It's an incredibly interesting thing, because if I pull up Russian diesel locomotives, we can find this exact one, and we are going to find it. Let me make sure that I get the right one at the right time at the right place. Let me see if I can. Okay, hold up. We're gonna have to go get the diesel electric motive engines of Russia. Let me go get this one, folks. This is not hard to find. This one's quite identifiable. Just gotta find it. Hang on, folks. We're gonna find it. It's not one of these, right? No, it's not. Well, folks, actually, oddly enough, that actually is not showing up, at least for anything that I can find right here. A little bit odd. I was about to say that it looked a lot like... Well, it actually doesn't look like Squad. Maybe it's Soviet era? Let me go check that. There's no way that that's Soviet era. That would be ancient for them to be operating. Well, it's not Soviet either. I actually don't know what that thing is. It's just a thing. That's all I can tell y'all. It is a locomotive. It is a diesel electric locomotive. But beyond that, we don't know what it is. There's another one further up that you cannot see in this picture, but still a pretty interesting thing. Moving on from that and into the rest of our news that we also had, we also got to hear something very interesting on top of that. On top of that as well. The city of Kursk was also under attack, again, just about an hour ago. We were able to hear the explosions like you were hearing right there. That's the sound.
A stupid Russian car alarm. I can't stand it. It goes off at the exact same time every single video on all of them.
You know, Matthew, some people said that that was a Ukrainian attack on Kursk. I say that that's the sound of Chris's mom falling down the stairs. It sounds pretty close
Oh,
to it.
yeah.
I mean, you know, it's the boom, boom, boom. You know what I mean. But moving on from, or you know, that's just Chris's mom on any Saturday evening. But moving on from that, we also got to hear the impacts in Kursk from another angle. We also got to see that one of the drones did get shot down and ended up careening straight into a residential building below.
Oh, great heavens.
That's the end of that clip. And moving on from that, here's the next one. That's the end of that clip, but what a crazy one right there. Also, I just saw some people. This is going to blow some minds here. Some people may not know a lot about trains, and they're going, wait a minute. What the hell does that mean, diesel electric? It's diesel or it's electric. Like, there's no way it could be diesel electric. I'm going to share something that's mind-blowing to all of y'all. Every single diesel locomotive in the world is diesel electric. Basically what they are, and I'll, let's see, AC44, C6M. We'll just pull up one of these because these are pretty common. That right there, it has a diesel engine inside of it, but the diesel engine is just the generator. It provides power to its electric motors. So it is a diesel electric because the actual tractive power in the wheels is provided by an electric motor. But the engine itself, the diesel engine, is what is providing the power to the electric motors to make the train move. So if you didn't know that, now you do. There's really no such thing as a pure diesel. It's a diesel electric. Every single diesel locomotive has some sort of electric power that is produced by the main diesel engine that's then sent to the wheelbases themselves. So practically it's a electric train that carries around its generator with it instead of being connected to an electric wire overhead to be able to run. That's what these are. But moving on from that, and that's the way it's always been, folks. That's nothing new. It's been that way since diesel trains came into being back in the 40s for the large part as a mainstream thing. They've always operated the same thing. But moving on from that, and on to the rest of the news we got in Kursk, we also got to see another clip here of one of the drones coming on down. Hitting right into that building. Russian air defense didn't really do too well on that one.
It just seemed like it was a bad day overall for Russia, just pretty much in every aspect. Just a terrible day.
It was a bad day for them in every degree. I mean, it was a sad day, a bad day, a terrible day. We also got to see an explosion happening in Voronezh as well. Take a look at this. Oh, a little impact out there.
Boom, jaga jaga.
Boom, man. And that's the end of the clip, but very interesting to see right there. Incredibly interesting to see. And finally, folks, finally, finally, folks, oh, yeah, I forgot. I was about to say we made it through all the Russian explosions. By the way, there was a rocket-making factory that was destroyed in the Moscow Oblast as well. Take a gander at this. This happened like 2 hours ago.
Oh, dear.
Now, there is no
Oh, they're
question.
in shock.
Yeah. Man, honestly, man, they're probably deaf, but there is no question here that that's a rocket-making factory. There's not a lot of industrial concerns blow up like that, unless they're making rockets in there.
Ой, жарко сюда. Вот зря мы сюда пошли.
And
там
there
осколки
went that
летят.
woman's husband's pension.
Поэтому говорю голову. Нифига себе.
Ой-ой-ой.
Oh, wow. It's an inferno.
It's like a fire tornado. And that's the end of that
Honestly,
clip.
I think we've learned one thing today, is that it turns out Ukraine does hold cards after all. They hold that Uno reverse, apparently. We found out today.
Dude, someone said, you don't hold all the cards. And Zelenskyy said, I actually do. I have all of the aces. It's like I have all of the kings.
He was just holding them the whole time. He said, hold.
Like, dude, when you know what's funny, man, is that like when just going back in the past, just for a moment of comedy, like when he was in the Oval Office and he was being told, "Have you at least said thank you once?" You know, I held all the cards. Zelenskyy was looking at him, going, "You don't even know what cards I hold. There are cards beyond your imagination right now that you don't even know. Right now, there's a guy in Chelyabinsk that's building entire container boxes, and we're going to blow up every Russian bomber. You don't even know what's coming around, Mr. President, because some people would say that Russia is with this shit.
I'm saying that they are in the shit. We are not the same. Like it's like totally different thing now. It's like, man,
Honestly,
to think when all that,
man, like, yeah, go ahead.
well, to think, man, like, just to wrap this up on my end, to think when that was going on in the Oval Office, he was probably leaving and still getting some of the details on the finalizations of those plans months ago.
He probably was. It's just crazy to think that honestly, like, I'm impressed over and over and over with how Ukraine can come up with things to like attack the Russians with, because for the longest time, every single military expert, every single analyst, like they said at the beginning of the war, they said it was going to last 3 days. They said Ukraine would get steamrolled. They don't have the same weapons that Russia has. They don't have the manpower. They don't have the will. They don't have the cohesion. They don't have anything like that. That's what the analysts said at the very beginning. And throughout the entire war, not only have they been fighting the Russians back, but they've been coming up with novel ways that nobody's really ever thought about before to defend themselves. Even this one today, which is just honestly, like, Ukraine was probably one of the most underestimated countries in fighting a war in a long, long time, if ever, maybe. And to say they don't have cards is honestly crazy, because they're the most ingenuitive country that's ever had to fight a war that I've seen in a long time.
Some people say that Ukraine is either, left or right. I say we're neither. We give strong left hooks and we give strong right hooks. Very different thing. But moving on out of all of this, it is time for us to get on into some more news that is not inside of Russia today. And, oh, by the way, I forgot one more thing. I just keep forgetting them because there's so many of them. There was an explosion that happened in Rostov-on-Don as well. Yay, there goes the car alarms. But another explosion in Rostov-on-Don. Just now, let me double and triple check here. So we covered all the airbase attacks and the Moscow stuff, and then we covered all the explosions throughout here, and then we covered all this, and then we covered the FSB raid and the whole thing being done in Chelyabinsk. Okay, so we have covered everything. So, after the events of today, I'm sure that many of y'all are assuming that the Russians gave a very fair and very balanced response to the absolute shocking turn that the Ukrainians actually do hold some cards and everything's fine. Dmitry Medvedev, playing with fire will end in hell! And that was a response. Like, we already knew that was coming around. The attempt to strike our strategic airfields is not just a terrorist act by the Kyiv national regime. It is direct proof that they finally lost their fair reason and instinct for self-preservation. They're turning the freaking Russian bombers into cinders. All this is not without the participation of the Western bastards. They are the ones who supply the freaks in green t-shirts with this and illusions of impunity. But it's time to remind them all, Russia has a long memory and very precise hands. That sounds oddly sexual right there. Like, honestly, that I kind of sus on that one. The response will not just be asymmetrical, it will be devastating. We know where decisions are made, where those who think they can fight with someone else's hands sit. We will strike where they least expect it. The time for polite formulations is over. Now, only steel, which Russians steal a lot of toilets and dishwashers, fire and pinpoint annihilation. Let them pray, although no one will help them anymore, neither NATO nor the devil with a fork as opposed to a spoon. And dude, he doesn't have a pitchfork, he just has a fork.
I told you Medvedev was talking like this. Like, he is so furious and so angry about this. He's naturally angry, like, anyways. When things going good for Russia, he's pissed off. But now he's extremely fuming. Like, the freaks in green t-shirts talking about they can pray, but nobody's going to even listen. The devil's got a fork. It's like, this doesn't even make any sense. Like, he's just fuming just for the hell of it.
Dude, this picture that Grok made of Medvedev is actually fairly accurate. And then this one's
this
really
guy's
accurate.
got that Napoleon complex. Look at that, a three-pronged fork. That's fitting for him. Oh, sad. Look at that. Oh, clown. Wow, they made every iteration.
Oh, my God, bro. It keeps going. No freaking.
Hope it doesn't get bad in a minute.
I hope not. We just kept going without stopping. But that's actually quite interesting. The Grok came up with so many variations of that. Anyways, moving on from that, we also got to hear that the Russians are now threatening Oreshniks, which are intermediate-range ballistic missiles with MIRVs on board. We've already seen them used before. But Russia is threatening the Oreshnik in response, and an urgent meeting is being held in the Kremlin due to the massive attack by the Ukrainian armed forces on the airfields, according to Russian media. We'll see how that goes. Beyond that, however, everyone's going down to Istanbul like nothing's happened. The Russian delegation did arrive, and they were asked, hey, do you like your country looking like you were just pimped out by a whole bunch of drones? And all the diplomats were responding with was, tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow. Literally like that. Like, I wish I had the clip. I cut it out for time reasons, but here are the Russian diplomats arriving in Istanbul, the Istanbul International Airport. And honestly, they ought to come into this peace negotiation humble, because it's like, just this day, the day before the negotiations, they just lost all of their bombers, really for the large part, 34% of them. So it's like, they better come into it humbly this time.
They look like they're a little bit lost and confused, like they're not really sure what they're doing there. They probably just like rounded up some random dudes off the street of Moscow and said, hey, just go and pretend like you're talking because we just need somebody to like be an actor or something. And these guys were like, oh, okay, yeah, sure.
Yes, comrade, in glory of the Russian Federation. But beyond that, though, that is all of our major news that has to do directly with Russia today, and then we're going to be getting into some stuff from yesterday. Not a lot, though, because we are pressed for time. We've already spent an hour and a half just yapping on the news. Beyond that, though, before we get into the rest of the news, I do want to take a quick moment to say in the last 36 hours, 1 second, folks. Bless me. In the last 36 hours, thank you very much. Several Russian train bridges have collapsed, causing train crashes. And a lot of people have been putting in their thoughts and prayers. And it appears that a lot of people are believing that these are Ukrainian saboteurs in Russia. Others are saying that it's Russian partisans under Ukrainian control. Some others are saying that it's Russian partisans acting alone. And some people are undecided. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this? And what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so 42% said it's probably Ukrainian saboteurs in Russia that's causing these bridges to suddenly collapse, either through planting explosives on them or something of that nature, while 37% said it's probably Russian partisans under Ukraine's control, or they're being coordinated by Ukrainian handlers, and 12% said Russian partisans are probably acting alone as defiance to Putin. So generally speaking, I would have to say that I believe they're probably Russian partisans that have a connection to the Ukrainian security service. That's my guess. I really doubt they're Ukrainian nationals, because that would be a little bit more difficult to conceal than using a Russian partisan to do the same thing. So I have a feeling it probably is Russian partisans under Ukraine control. And I think what the operation with the drone showed us is Ukraine must have a pretty large network of partisans, or at least Russian citizens that are loyal to Ukraine but living in Russia, because they probably didn't pull that off without some sort of internal Russian help, even though they claim that they hired unsuspecting truck drivers to haul it in. I think that they had some Russian help on the inside. So I think this is probably them mobilizing those individuals and sending them out to cause the sabotage inside of Russia. And of course, Ukraine does have very deep tentacles inside of Russia. We didn't know exactly how deep, but I think it's starting to become very apparent that it's pretty deep. So I'm with the 37%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that the fact that they were somehow able to get foamers involved in attacking the Russians, these have got to be some Ukrainian saboteurs for sure. Because there is no way, folks, that any Russian partisans would ever get involved in the operation of destroying a foaming operation where you get to watch a train crossing a bridge. No way in hell. This has got to be Ukrainian partisans. So I would go with the 41%. I'd have to agree with them. But being in all seriousness beyond the joke, I would say that it's most likely Ukrainian saboteurs in Russia. They are getting some inside help, but it's being largely spearheaded by the SBU and by Ukrainians themselves that are in the country, at least in my opinion. But moving on from that, it is time for us to get on into some East Asian news. Some East Asian news, because this was the thumbnail and title of our last night's stream that was ill-fated and did not get to run beyond the intro and the outro. But moving on into Beijing. What's up, Beijing? It appears that a lot's going on in Beijing today, because the Chinese threatened us yesterday that the U.S. should not play with fire on Taiwan, pretty much threatening that we better not get involved at all, even in support of Taiwan in any way. And then on top of that, the Chinese added on, according to Zhang Zhaogang, the defense minister spokesperson, that if we continue forward, with the Golden Dome program, that we are going to be violating the Outer Space Treaty, and they're going to be weaponizing space and conducting a armed space race of a sort. The funny thing is that they already did that before we did by creating the robot satellite that can rip apart other satellites in orbit. So it's like, y'all kind of already did that. But beyond that, they're trying to act like this is fresh and new. So here you go.
推进部署金琼等天级武器系统，持续扩张外空军力，挑动外空军备竞赛，这违反外空条约相关原则，加剧外空战场化和军备竞赛风险，动摇国际安全与军控体系，犹如又一次打开潘多拉魔盒。这也再次证明，美国是外空武器化、战场化的最大推手。我们敦促美方停止在外空扩军备战，以实际行动维护全球战略稳定。
I always find it weird how their spokespeople like take a pause after every single word. Because if y'all heard this translated directly from Mandarin to English, this actually isn't a conversational tone. It would be more so talking like this. And to take it's almost like speaking like William Shatner, really. Like everyone speaks like that on an official level in China in their native language. I always find it really weird. Don't you, Matthew?
Yeah, he sounds like that North Korean, like a really animated TV announcer that they've had for like decades that announces the news on the state television. He sounds like that. I think that's just like the communist like speaking style, I guess, or something. Because I noticed that they all seem to do that. I guess that's just like the way that they project themselves when they speak in a setting like this, because it seems to be across the board.
Maybe it's just an East Asian thing. But then again, I don't really see this going on in Japan or South Korea, so I really do think it's a commie kind of a thing where they act like that.
Definitely commie.
Yeah, I think they have like a specific emphasis on just emphasizing every single word, which I think it's just ridiculous sounding, because it doesn't sound at all like anything like you would hear in, for example, Japan or South Korea, where it's just a normal flow of words. They will say something like, the Republic of the United States will defend. It's almost, dude, it's honestly like one of those mile marker reader things on the railroads where it's like, mile marker 391. Like, it's that kind of crap, but for an official statement.
It's kind of like that. Like it's, if you're trying to think about like what the communists want to do, they always want to make it seem like, mighty, glorious, and sort of like inspirational or patriotic or something. So they were talking in like that inspirational tone where it's like really pronounced, really proper, really nice. Like it's got some cadence behind it. That's what they're trying to go for. That's the I think the thoughts behind it.
Maybe so. I still find it to be a little bit odd, though. And also, I saw someone say it's a cultural thing. In case you said it's a cultural thing, I'm doubting it a little bit, because if you look at a South Korean news presenter versus a North Korean news presenter, they have very different styles of elocution, and both of them are from the same cultural group of the Kingdom of Joseon, which is what originally Korea is. So considering that they're both from the same cultural group and they both speak the same language and would largely have the same customs and mannerisms beyond the communist influence of the North, but they still elocute official statements in totally different ways. It's largely, I believe, more so due to the communist ideology, like Matthew's saying, more so than anything that's specifically cultural to that specific cultural group. But with that, we are going to be moving on from that news and on down to the Indian subcontinent for a quick little info drop that Indian troops yesterday shot and killed a Pakistani citizen who refused to stop while approaching the border fence. We don't know if that's going to turn into anything. So far, it hasn't. But yesterday when I read that, I was like, that might be the justification to turn it into something, because just the day before, the Indians rejected the request from the Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif for calls on dialogue with the Indus water treaties, which have been rescinded, and the Indians are still blocking a significant flow of water into Pakistan. So it appears that that may end up being some sort of a casus belli for Pakistan later to justify an open conflict with India to try and reopen their waterways and once again have water flowing down the Indus River Valley. Moving on from that, and on out of that news, it is time for us to get on up into the areas of Ukraine itself, as well as Poland. We were able to hear that Poland is building fortifications along the area of Kaliningrad, as well as the area along the border with Belarus. We can see significant amounts of developments being made with these defenses. A large amount of caltrop-style tank traps of significant variety, anti-tank ditches, as well as dug-in fortifications and positions to be able to try and conduct a defense, or at least slow any kind of an offensive if it begins. We've also been able to hear inside of Ukraine, at least today, that the Ukrainian armed forces have continued to defend the lines. For time constraint purposes, I'm not going to be going through all of the frontline news that we had yesterday. We simply would not be able to do that. But I will be picking some things out, cherry picking them for the large part, to be able to talk about them. We were able to hear that the Russians are continuing to take ground inside the Sumy area, and it does appear that the talks were completely a ploy. However, we were able to confirm that the Russians were being taken prisoner in this area, as it does appear that the offensive may be overextending in some directions, or the Ukrainians are able to conduct concerted, precise counterattacks to be able to overwhelm small groups of the Russian army and then take some of them prisoner, which we can see in this clip right here.
Very nice use of tape there. They've upgraded from duct tape to the clear scotch.
Man, it's really more expensive stuff, honestly.
Yeah, they're giving them luxuries.
I mean, you see here this guy just kind of sitting around. I'm going to cut the clip short. It's 8 minutes long, so we won't be able to watch all of it. But we were also able to hear that more evacuation orders have been issued for 11 settlements to urgently evacuate to safe places due to the ongoing Russian offensive. Meanwhile, in the location unknowns, we did also get to see that a Russian drone spotted an F-16 for the first time ever on their camera. And there it goes. There's the F-16. It's that little black dot moving across the screen. And there it goes, off into the horizon. We see them zooming in.
Where'd that thing go?
It is sure as hell an F-16. Pretty cool to note. And it's just flying around out there, free as a bird. Oh, say.
Just beautiful, isn't it? Just absolutely beautiful.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light? It's great to see an F-16. It's a beautiful thing. Look at it go.
And to think, back when those were sent, that was a nuclear threat to Russia, and now all of a sudden it seems like it's no longer an issue. That's kind of odd.
Man, it was such a non-issue that the Netherlands just gave the last remaining 25 they had to them. It's like, okay, it's like I guess it wasn't that big of an issue. But you know something, folks? Beyond everything that happened today with the nuclear submarine base exploding, all the air bases getting hit, 34% of the Russian bomber fleet getting knocked out, loads of railroad bridges being destroyed near to the border regions, there was one thing that was really, really big today, massive today. And that was that a single Bobcat was destroyed.
Oh, that's what I'm talking about. We got one Bobcat. I'm telling you what, they're just like, it's like a trickle flow here. It's like I was an addict or something like that. And just give me a little piece just to keep me hooked or something. I'm telling you. But anyway, tell us more.
Just a little piece. But Miss Disa, keeper of the records, stated that the second day of troop losses over 1,200 and above the 7-day average, with numbers across categories, may indicate the start of a summer offensive. And it does appear that that is largely the case. So we have been able to see that 1,230 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed in the past 24 hours, along with 4 armored personnel carriers, 127 supply trucks, 5 main battle tanks, 52 artillery pieces, 151 drones, 1 MLRS, 3 cruise missiles, and 1 Bobcat skid steer. It is a wonderful thing to see, and it's great to know that the Ukrainians are inflicting significant casualties. Moving on out of that area of the line and further on down into the area of Kremenna, we did get to see the Ukrainians taking out some Russian equipment with their drones. I'm not going to be showing all of these clips today because we are almost getting overtime with the news even as it is right now, and that's just trying to cover what we were covering today. And someone tried to come in and say that the thumbnail was clickbait. So we literally covered that for the first hour of the show. It'd be really hard to make it a whole hour of news coverage on clickbait and then have video and picture evidence for it. Aren't these Russian bots pitiful, folks? Aren't they pitiful?
I have an analogy for these bots. You know, when you go fishing and you cast your rod out, you put bait on the end of that line, right? The fish looks at it and says, that is bait. It looks like something that I would like to go chomp on and eat. And it's actually a worm. And they actually go eat the worm. It's not that it wasn't a worm. It was actually bait, but it was a real worm. And he chomped on it and he got hooked and he got reeled in. The same thing here. It's not fake. It's really actually a worm. And you just got reeled in right to the real news.
Man, you know what's crazy, man, is that these people say, some people say that it's clickbait. And it's like, it's not crazily enough. I mean, you know, if it's clickbait, we must be pretty good at it then. So I guess, you know, we must be a master. Well, we'll just leave it there. I'll let y'all fill in the blanks. But moving on from that and out of that clip and on into our next one, further on down the way, we did get to see that the Ukrainians were hitting Russians hiding in hangars near to the city of Pokrovsk. We can see this in this clip right here. It's almost like a Warner Brothers intro. Oh, look, it's Worm Busters, actually.
Speaking of worms, we're busting them now.
Oh,
Warner brother. That's what the fish wish they did. I wish that they had done a bit of a move called a Warner brother before they, pulled up on the hook and took that bait.
Man, the Russians were like, man, if you ever see a drone, please, Warner brother.
But they never did, though. They just ran a brother. They ran him out.
Man, the Russians today were like, they didn't even have a round. They just found out watching all those Russian bombers burning.
Someone said it's great clickbait. It's the best clickbait, isn't it? It's true. Like if it's accurate clickbait, that's the best thing a YouTuber could ever ask for. Like real news that is like clickbaity, but it's real. That's like the best case scenario ever.
It's the greatest clickbait because our clickbait is real. Other people do clickbait and they say, The Ukrainians captured a train. It has Russian Su-57s on it, and the whole thing came to Ukraine. That's bad clickbait. Our clickbait is 100% true and fact-checked, unlike the fake news like CNN, who puts out a sad sap story, and they sit there and go, oh, it's terrible, look at it. The Ukrainians, they're fighting a war for their own survival. Absolutely terrible. Look at it. It's a tragic thing. They had to just cry and bitch about it the whole time. Really sad. And we're not like that. That's just wimp stuff right there. Don't like it at all. Not great. But moving on from that and on into our next clips, a little bit further on down the way, we did get to hear that a Russian train was attacked and derailed today. Folks, you know what's crazy is that Matthew was telling me, hey man, trains have nothing to do with our news coverage. Why do you keep bringing it up? And look who's laughing now. It's a part of our news coverage, and it's actually a pretty big part today because a third military target of rail networking was operated by the Russian army, which was struck last night. This time, in Russian-occupied Ukraine. The Ukrainian GUR reports that on the night of the 31st of May, a train moving from Melitopol to Crimea was struck near the city of Yakimivka, and it was apparently a entirely fuel train. So it was nothing but fuel cars, or as we call them, oil tanks. Nevertheless, as a result of the explosion, the train derailed. The rail track is crucial for the logistics support of the Russian army in the south of Ukraine. What do you know, folks?
That's something I've been wanting to say for a long time. I've realized down deep in my soul that trains are so important. I've been wanting to say this for a long time, just kept it quiet. Trains are so important, like honestly, to the war effort in Russia. And it's just, I think Russia did that to spite my ass, I think, honestly, because it's like, right after I say, oh, trains, please no. And then all of a sudden Russia, the partisans go and blow up 3 rail bridges and cause 3 trains to just have a calamity. It's just coincidental.
It's absolutely crazy because it's almost like I wheeled it into being, Matthew. I was always saying, trains are important to Russia and trains are really important to the world. And then I would go and talk about it or show like a train or something. And look at it, folks. If you think about something hard enough and you really, really wish it into being, somehow now I can actually merge my interest in trains with our news coverage, and it actually is a part of it. Isn't that crazy, folks? I would have never imagined that, actually, and I wouldn't have imagined that we would have had this kind of depth of news on it. Over the past 24 hours, we've had literally 3 independent incidents, one in Bryansk, one in Kursk, and one near Melitopol, of independent train news segments today. Pretty crazy with that. But I still say that I absolutely hate the look of Russian trains of every single type. They all look terrible. And I'm going to show you all a few of them because they are like Eastern European trains are just the worst in my opinion. Let me go show you all some of the electric ones. Like that thing. Like that's terrible looking.
Yeah, actually, like I know it's going to be unpopular. I actually kind of like the look of that for some reason, just because it has like, it's going to sound terrible. But also, by the way, before I say that, why is it look like they colored in the orange stripes with like a Sharpie? Why is it all like literally like somebody drew it with a Sharpie or a pen? But anyways, it kind of looks like the old like Call of Duty stuff. Like if I'm being honest, I think that's why I like it.
I'm not gonna lie, dude. This has the same paint job as an old psych ward on it.
Maybe that's why I like it. I didn't think about that. Maybe that's why I like it.
Bro, the engineers on those get grippy socks for free. Like it comes included.
That's when you really start foaming. You get put in the padded car.
Yeah, like you do. But just look at them. These are the electric ones. They're all terrible. I hate them so much. Like I just think they're all the worst looking things that could be imagined. Like let me just go pick this. Look at that. Like these are terrible. Absolutely terrible.
These are bad. They don't even keep information on them really because they're so bad.
Bro, these things look so bad that when they go down the rails, they don't even go. They go. It's like these are just terrible, absolutely horrendous compared to our raw American trains, American diesel electrics, which are literally just diesel GEVOs. Sorry, I almost said it wrong there. Let me go get them though, because we got to have them. Here we go. We should be able to find them. Here we go. The GE Universal Series. Wait, hang on. Hold up. What? Wait a minute. I'm sorry. I got it wrong, apparently. This is not the Universal Series. That was like one of their first production things. Diesel electrics. Yes, here we go. The list. Man, this is a foamer's dream right here, is this list. But, we have amazing things nowadays. Like, let's see, what would it be? It would be the GE. Where in the world are the Gs? Where the hell? So they're not showing the general, the evolution series. That's just ridiculous. This is just absurd. But beyond that, we have great looking things like this. And I just think that these look a lot better.
Yeah, those look better.
Yeah, they look a lot better. We're just going to move on from this, though. It would take forever to find a Jivo for some reason, so we're just going to leave that alone. Moving on from that, though, we did get to see that the Russian Shahed did hit Odessa a little while ago, which we got to see in this clip right here.
Oh, did you hear that guy before it hit? He went, Myak.
Man, he went, Nyak. Hold up, let's see if we can get it again. Oh, now the video is going to buffer. Can we refresh?
Oh, look, it's an Elon.
Oh, look, an Elon. Bro,
man, that was a horrific noise that guy made right for that hit. He wasn't even near the explosion. He was just off in the distance.
Bro, he went, Bro, I'm not gonna lie.
That's like a dad sneeze.
I can get the adrenaline and everything, but that was like the Wilhelm scream kind of a thing right there. I'm not gonna lie. But moving on from that and out of that clip, unfortunate thing to see that a Shahed did hit Odessa. It is time for us now, right on time actually, to get on up to Kyiv to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on the 1st of June. And I do have to point out to y'all that he's going to be clowning on the Russians specifically about that attack that happened today in the speech. So I would pay great attention to this one because it is gold. So here it is. Peach!
Speech!
Здоров'я, шановні українці, українки. Щойно була доповідь голови Служби безпеки України Василя Малюка. Блискуча операція проведена на території ворога виключно проти військових цілей, проти саме тієї техніки, яка використовувалась в ударах проти України. Дуже відчутні втрати Росії і абсолютно справедливі, заслужені їхні втрати. Дякую Службі безпеки, особисто генералу Малюку, також всім, хто був задіяний в операції. Готували операцію більш ніж 1,5 роки. Планування, організація, всі деталі були ідеально підготовлені. Можна сказати впевнено, що це абсолютно унікальна операція. Найцікавіше, і вже зараз це можна говорити публічно, офіс нашої операції на території Росії знаходився безпосередньо поруч з управлінням ФСБ Росії в одній з їхніх областей. Загалом в операції було використано 117 дронів і відповідна кількість операторів дронів працювали. Вражено 34% стратегічних носіїв крилатих ракет на аеродромах базування. Діяли наші люди на території різних російських регіонів в 3 часових поясах. І наших людей напередодні операції з території Росії вивели. Зараз вони в безпеці. Ті, хто нам допомагав. Дійсно, приємно, коли речі, які санкціонував ще рік і 6 місяців тому, працюють та забирають у росіян більше 40 одиниць стратегічної авіації. Продовжимо цю роботу. Ще до початку здійснення цієї операції у нас були дані розвідки про підготовку чергового російського масованого удару. І це дуже важливо для всіх наших людей – не ігнорувати повітряні тривоги. У ніч на сьогодні було майже 500 російських дронів, ударних дронів. Щотижня вони збільшували кількість одиниць на удар. Зараз вони теж підготували калібри з морських носіїв. Ми розуміємо, з ким маємо справу. Ми будемо захищатись всіма методами, які доступні нам, доступні Україні, доступні українцям. Ми жодної секунди не хотіли цієї війни. Ми пропонували росіянам припинення вогню. Ще з 11 березня на столі американська пропозиція повного, безумовного припинення вогню. Саме росіяни забажали продовжувати війну і навіть в таких умовах, коли весь світ вимагає зупинити вбивства. І дійсно потрібен тиск на Росію який має повернути її до реальності. Тиск санкцій, тиск наших сил, тиск дипломатії – все має працювати разом. Сьогодні провів тривалу нараду з міністром оборони України, з міністром закордонних справ України, з керівником мого офісу, керівниками наших розвідок та військовими. Ми обговорили, що саме очікуємо від зустрічі в Стамбулі в понеділок. Ми пропонуємо і надалі повне, безумовне припинення вогню та всі достойні та раціональні кроки, які можуть дати тривалий і надійний мир. Українська пропозиція, яку ми дали росіянам, логічна та реалістична. Росіяни свій меморандум так і не передали нікому. У нас немає, турецької сторони немає, також у американської сторони російського документу немає. Попри це, ми спробуємо досягти хоча б якогось прогресу на шляху до миру. Сьогодні ж була доповідь головкома Сирського по фронту, по нашій Курській операції. Я вдячний всім нашим підрозділам. Стійкість на землі так само важлива, як і наші операції на території ворога, які так надихають. І ще одне. Сьогодні росіяни завдали ракетного удару по навчальному табору на Дніпровщині. На жаль, є втрати, загинули наші військові. Мої співчуття усім рідним та близьким. Це вже не перший такий удар, коли Україна втрачає людей. Я призначив нараду за участі, зокрема, Михайла Драпатова, Андрія Гнатова, Олександра Сирського та міністра оборони Умєрова по його поверненню після перемовин в Стамбулі, щоб з усім цим розібратися. Наші всі бойові хлопці потрібні на фронті, у захисті України. Кожен. І кожне життя ми маємо берегти. Всі рішення, які для цього потрібні, будуть ухвалені. Дякую всім, хто допомагає. Дякую всім, хто з Україною. Слава Україні!
And with that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on day 1,193 of the news from around the world. And it is time for us to move on into the second segment of this stream, where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. The news segment was so slam-packed, I had to actually remove the question segment in the middle of it, because I wanted to make sure that we could get to all of the news first, so that way we can make sure to have enough time to be able to cover most things in great detail. And we still had to skip over some things tonight, just because of how big the news truly was. But beyond that, we are going to be getting on into that whole second question segment where we get to talk to y'all about all kinds of things. But before we even get into the poll, I want to make sure that I shout out all of the folks who supported the fundraiser and have been able to get it up to a whopping $3,511. That is an absolutely amazing amount, and I got to thank everyone who supported the fundraiser, both in massive donations and in smaller donations, for pitching in and helping out that fundraiser tonight. Every single one of y'all is helping out in supporting American and Western interests, not only by just saying it, but by actually putting your money where your mouth is and actually supporting it in a meaningful way that actually is affecting the very people that we cover the news on and the very people who are being affected on those battlefields between the forces of evil and the forces here in our Western sphere. It is absolutely amazing and incredible to know that so many of y'all have once again answered the call to support the Western American interest and have continued to support these fundraisers years after they began, way back at the beginning of the war in Ukraine. And so I want to make sure that we can get to all of the top donors of the night. I wish we could call out everyone, but there's so many people who support these fundraisers every night, it would be pretty much impossible for us to call out everyone who threw in everything from $1 up. So we have to limit ourselves to only calling out the folks who put in more than $50, but I want the folks to know that we cannot call out that we thank y'all massively nonetheless, and we wish that we could have the time to call y'all's names off, because y'all are as significant a part of this fundraiser as the massive donors as well. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so the top donor since the very beginning of the stream, of course, we had the largest one of the night, which was from Brittany Taz, who put in a $1,000 donation and literally carried a huge portion of the fundraiser. So huge shout out to Brittany for the massive support of the fundraiser. Also, big shout out to Hal Rose, who threw in a $433 donation in total. Also, a massive chunk as well to Hal Rose. We also had a 100 from Activista, as well as a 100 from Dalton McKee, and then a 100 from Old Warrior, as well as Waba, who threw in a 50. Along with the Rad Doctor, who also threw in a 50, along with the Greg Carrier, Samuel Sizamonski, as well as Kim McGee, Nightmare Before Christmas, Gary Moore, Rennie Allen, Bob P., and also Tom S. And once again, thank you to all those top donors we just called off, and literally everybody else that threw in any amount tonight, because without all that support adding up to the fundraiser, we would not have smashed the goal and gone well beyond it. So huge shout out to the LSA once again for making that happen. And Enforcer, what say you?
I got to give a massive shout out to all of the folks who have thrown in a massive amount of support tonight to the fundraiser, especially Brittany Taz, who threw in a whopping $1,000, because every single one of y'all have made this thing possible. Everyone who we were able to call out and the folks who we weren't able to call out. It's absolutely incredible to see that sort of a thing, and I got to say that that is a wonderful and amazing thing to know, that so many of y'all have continued to support these fundraisers well on into the present day. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and it's time for us to get on into the questions. And of course, Matthew, actually, I understand that we have a poll before we get into the questions, so what do we got?
All right, so the poll that's currently running, our last one of the night, it says reports are conflicting about whether Ukraine pre-informed the United States of its secret drone attack inside of Russia, and what do you think? So 51%, the most popular choice, was Ukraine likely did not inform the United States beforehand, while 30% said Ukraine likely did inform the United States, and 13% said it's a 50-50 chance of either one. And this is a tricky one here, because I think Ukraine at first claimed that they did inform them, and then the United States said that they absolutely did not have any knowledge of this whatsoever. So it's a little bit conflicting. I think Ukraine might have actually walked back their statements as well. So it's very uncertain. Now, just based on probability and the whole situation and reality, I would say that Ukraine likely did inform the United States, because they don't want to risk losing their support if they go too overboard and the administration doesn't like it. That could cause them to lose support. So out of safety, they probably did inform the United States, but we're probably pretending like we did not know. So that way we can claim plausible deniability. So that's my assumption, and I'm with a 30%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree for the large part. It wouldn't make any sense for the United States to admit that they knew about that one, especially considering how successful the attack was. We probably don't want the heat to come directly back to the United States, at least for now. So I would also have to agree that we most likely knew, but we're trying to deny that we did for plausible deniability purposes. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And it's time for us to move on into all the questions at large. So, Matthew, what do we have?
All right, so jumping right into all of our live chat questions we've been receiving throughout the entire stream. Our first one goes to AF Kaplan, who says, do y'all think that Russia will retaliate for Ukraine's attacks by sabotaging the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant?
I would doubt it, but considering that they're the ones operating the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, they're pretty much connecting it to the Russian grid. It would end up hurting them more than it would hurt Ukraine, and also depending on how the prevailing winds are blowing, it could blow most of the radiation into Russia, which would be not really helping them out much at all, at least in from what we would know right now. So I would doubt that. I think that they're most likely going to go with an Oreshnik strike or some other major direct action instead of something that could be considered to be a very weak action, or possibly even a active nuclear war, like blowing up a nuclear power plant, which you really can't fix because it still would be in the middle of an active war zone. So that would be my opinion on it, at least for right now, and I hope that does answer that question well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next question goes to Off Grid with Scott, who says, was the drone truck driven autonomously, or was it driven there and then abandoned?
From what we know, it was driven there, and the driver was still inside on some of the trucks. Some of the truck drivers apparently abandoned their trucks. Others actually got blown up with the explosions from inside the containers. So that's largely what we know at the moment about the fate of the drivers. But the trucks were not AI driven. So I hope that does answer that well, or at least address it the best we would know. And with that, we are on to the next one.
So this one goes to Anthony Harden, who said, did the tops of the containers blow off, or did people take them off by hand? Like, how did they get the tops off the containers to launch the drones?
Apparently, there was some sort of remote control feature that was able to remove the roof. It was pretty much like a retractable roof screen that was on top of it. And once that was removed, the drones could just make their way out through the opening and then towards their target. That's generally what we're knowing at the moment. But, of course, exact details on how that system works could come out later. But when we look at the pictures of the preparations in Chelyabinsk, we can actually see on these pictures the roofs of the containers, and we can pretty much see the retractable rooftops right there, clearly showing us where those drones would have exited out of. And we can also, interesting enough, you can also see them right there as well, but it appears that they were putting out, I don't actually know how the retractable roof really worked exactly. I was assuming that it was these panels on top, but really looking at it now, I couldn't tell you exactly how it functioned, but from what I was told, it was some sort of a retractable roof that would swing open. But with that, I hope that does address that well, at least from what we know. But the entire thing was remote. Beyond the driver actually driving them to the location, the opening of the top of the container and the launch of the drones and everything else in between was all remote controlled or AI operated. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Sean Willem, who said, would this action done by Ukraine by secretly attacking with drones inside of Russian territory, is this now a way that Russia can justify and also sell to the Russian public a full military mobilization?
It's possible that it could be, that could end up being the case. It's just that still, the Russian Federation stated that they would never conduct a full mobilization, and although I've said that the Russian public has been beat down so badly they wouldn't openly revolt, I don't know if they would openly revolt in that kind of a situation, and that could be something that the Russian government is actually scared of, is that they could end up being wildly unpopular, and then they could end up causing a lot of civil unrest, at least from what I would know. So, with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. I think that the chances of a full mobilization are still somewhat out there and are not going to be entirely likely even well on into the next few months. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Yadodis, who said, how severe do y'all expect the conventional response to be from Russia? Because I predict another hypersonic volley and mass drones. Honestly, I'll say on that one real quick. I do certainly believe there will be a Russian response. Like, I don't think there's any way they can ignore this. There were some theories that maybe Russia would double down on the diplomacy side of things in order to manipulate the United States into looking like Russia's the real victim here, and that they were the victim of a, quote unquote, Ukrainian terrorist attack. But I don't think that's likely, because Putin has to answer to the people that are underneath him, that are in the government. Even though he is a dictator, he still has to keep them in his good graces to a certain extent, and also the elites in the Moscow area as well. He has to sort of keep them on his side to a certain degree. So I think there will be a conventional response. I think they're probably going to end up trying to strike the Kyiv decision-making centers. That's probably what they're going to go for. It's unclear if they're going to use an Oreshnik to do that or some type of IRBM missile, but they're probably going to go for that. That's the next logical step, because Russia did say that this was their red line. If their strategic bomber fleet was attacked in mass like this, that was the red line that they said they would take extreme action over. So it's probably coming. They're making a lot of meetings right now to discuss what they're going to do. So it could be what you're suggesting. But Enforcer, what do you think?
I would say that it could actually be something along those lines, where it could be an Oreshnik strike or something similar. It seems highly likely at this point. There's really no reason to doubt that that would not happen, because we've already seen that the Russians have conducted the Oreshnik strike for something far less significant than this. So I have a feeling that this will have to be, with some kind of a strong response, and that'll probably be the one that they're shooting for right now, quite literally, pun intended, in a sense. But with that, I hope that does address that well, at least from what I know at the moment. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And Dante has an even deeper question than that about the same topic. He said, do you think that Russia will use tactical nukes to take out military targets in Ukraine as a response instead of just simply having a strike? Will they use nukes?
I doubt that a decent bit. I don't think that they're going to use nuclear weapons directly, because that would escalate this into a nuclear conflict, and then that's forcing the West either to completely back off, which is highly unlikely, or to start matching with a similar response, or possibly the entry into a conventional war, which wouldn't really be the greatest thing for the Russians. So I'm still doubting that any kind of a real tactical nuclear weapon usage is going to be coming around the corner. I have a feeling that's still going to be a good bit away. So I would largely doubt that. Still a very interesting question, though. But with that, I hope that does address it, at least the best I can, in my opinion. And once again, everyone, everything's in my opinion. I could be right, I could be wrong. Hell, I don't know. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a question from Nematode, who said, do you think the Russians evacuated the leadership from Moscow last week because they heard there would be a special Ukraine attack coming, and they did that out of a precaution?
I would doubt that because the attack didn't really hit anywhere around Moscow, and they actually ended up flying a lot of these government officials quite literally almost into the face of danger if they landed at Chelyabinsk, because that was where the operation was largely being coordinated and headquartered out of up until the day of the attack. So I would generally doubt that. I think it was more so the fact that that was just an entirely unrelated thing, and then this happened not long after. And so with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, at least from what I would know. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a question from Thomas D'Orazio. And Thomas said, do you think that they were thwarted at Engels Air Base, or did they just not try to attack Engels whatsoever in the secret attack?
I don't think they tried to attack Engels Air Base. They already attacked it in the past with a great deal of success, and so I just think that that wasn't really one of the main targets this time, because if there was any kind of an attack that was attempted and failed at Engels, we would have seen some sort of proof of captured trucks. The Russians would have said something about it, or we would have had proof that the trucks exploded before they could make it there, and we didn't have proof of neither. So from what we can tell, it doesn't appear that any attempt was made to try and actually attack the Engels Air Base. So I hope that answers that the best I can, at least in my opinion. Got to say that on all of them, folks. Some people don't know that that's just my opinion. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one here goes to Measureman, who said, is an EMP response likely now by Russia in response to this attack? Because there is a massive solar flare and geostorm going on right now and into tomorrow, and that would give Russia some type of plausible deniability that they didn't actually detonate an EMP, but instead they could say that they didn't do it and cause the damage.
EMPs, at least at this moment in time, are only possible through a nuclear explosion. So unless if the sun is hurtling a thermonuclear bomb at the state of Ukraine, it would be pretty tough to actually use an EMP, because EMPs are largely a work of fiction. The only kind of electromagnetic pulse device that we have that can even sometimes work, kind of, was so large it had to be mounted on board a 747. And also considering that the Russians are not as technologically advanced as us, they have no real operating electronic warfare system that could conduct any kind of significant damage inside the state of Ukraine. So with that in mind, I would highly doubt that, just simply because the technology isn't really there yet to be able to do that sort of a thing. And I see Tanner Toxicity saying that there are non-nuclear EMPs, and we have looked into this before, but really, let's see, electromagnetic pulse device. Here we go. So really the only way that we can actually use one of these things in the modern day with any kind of certainty, with any kind of significant range, it is a nuclear weapon. That's it. We've looked into this before on stream a long time ago, about a year ago, and it turns out that there is really no easy way to do that, at least at the moment. And even so, it's on a very limited kind of a scale or a scope, to the point that it couldn't be done front-wide or nationwide in Ukraine. It would be in a very, very small and limited area. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, because yes, that is true. I actually did mention that a second ago, Tanner Toxicity. There are non-nuclear EMPs, but most of them are the size of 747s, and even still, they have an incredibly limited range, and they were, and as a matter of fact, deemed completely unusable, and most of those 747s were decommissioned. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next question here goes to Ms. Disa, who says, why did Ukraine explain what they did in detail, exposing the whole operation?
Probably to embarrass the Russians is my only guess. It's really interesting to see they did that the day, literally just about a couple of hours after the attack was over. They just unveiled every single thing that they had done, probably to embarrass the Russian Federation and to also show that the Ukrainians actually hold a significant amount of leverage and cards, in a sense, over the Russians even at this point in the war. That would be my belief at this point, because it is quite obvious to me at every single level, this was a massive embarrassment for the Russian FSB, and it was a death nail to the Russian strategic bomber fleet to lose 34% of their force in one day. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and a great question, by the way. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here is going to go to Epic Trains Canada, who said, do you think the Ukrainians will use the same AI drone method to take out the rest of the A-50 fleet as well?
Well, that's an interesting question. I would say no, because there was only one A-50 left. So if it got blown up today, that was the whole fleet. If it didn't get blown up today, the whole fleet's still living. Because they only had 5 operational ones at the beginning of the war. 3 of them were shot down, 2 of them in close succession within weeks of each other. And then I think the third one was shot down about a couple of months after that. Then they only had 2 left. They gave one to North Korea, and the only one that was left was at Ivanovo today. So if it ended up getting hit and destroyed, that means that they lost all of the A-50s, and that means that the Ukrainians won't have to go after the A-50 fleet beyond this point because that simply won't exist. And so with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Bad Doggy, who says, do you think this may be the first part of a larger operation that Ukraine's going to conduct inside of Russian lines?
I would say maybe. I'm doubting it, though, considering that they released all of that information about how that attack worked. I'm thinking that it might not be the beginning or of the end. I think it was really the beginning and the end in a single attack, in my opinion, because the fact that they did that, pulled it off successfully, and then literally spilled the beans on how all of it was working and what they were doing, they're going to be dealing with a heightened sense of security from the Russian government from that point on if they have any internal operations still ongoing in Russia, and that can start to put unwanted attention or heat onto those that the Ukrainians wouldn't really want. So I would doubt it a little bit. I think this attack was sort of a one-off thing, and this is not going to end up being a common occurrence, at least on like a weekly basis, maybe every several months it might be, but on a weekly or daily basis, I'm highly doubtful. But with that, I hope that addresses that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here is going to go to Jezza, who said, have you heard that on another topic in the Middle East, that Iran now has allegedly enough uranium for 10 nuclear weapons right now?
I have heard about that. We actually heard that they had enough enriched uranium products for about 5 earlier, and it appears they just keep growing the number, at least according to information reports. It's incredibly concerning, and I'd say that we should strike now while we still can, but apparently the people out there think that it's better to negotiate with people who want to openly kill us, because maybe they can be reasoned with, although I certainly believe that they cannot be reasoned with at all. But that's just my opinion, folks. It's not like we've seen a thing or two here on this channel. But with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one here is going to go to Uncle Sam, who said, are you shocked that the U.S. president was not informed before the attacks, and what does that really mean?
I believe he was informed. It's just that they want to have plausible deniability to say that they weren't. It wouldn't make any sense for the Ukrainians to be trying to get more U.S. support, and then in the process of that say, let's go forward with an attack that is going to enrage the Russians seriously without checking with the U.S. They have checked with us on almost everything that they've done inside of Russia. Even if it didn't involve any kind of Western weaponry, they usually would check with us to see if we would be willing to provide any kind of intelligence or anything of those sorts. And so the idea that the president or anyone in the U.S. government was not informed at all seems to be a bit of a stretch. And so with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, at least from what I know, in my opinion, for the larger part. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to none other. Actually, real quick before I move to our next live chat question, a big shout out to AAJAS, who just earned a $50 donation, by the way, and brought us up to 3,646 raised, which is fantastic and well above the goal by a long shot. So huge shout out to you for that support. And also, we have a question here from, let's see, Sean Willem, who said, with Ukraine hitting strategic nuclear forces, could this lead Russia to having a justification to use nukes at least, and use them before you lose them kind of thinking?
It could be the case, maybe. But still, at the same time, considering that the Russian Federation just had a lot of the classified documents about their most secretive facilities unveiled to the public a while ago, and the Ukrainians certainly have access to those, they might not want to, because they might be a little bit concerned that the security systems have been breached, or maybe there's insiders in the nuclear silos at this point that are acting as Russians and have been for years, but they're really not. There could be a lot of concerns at this point about actually trying to use the nuclear weapons because of the security compromises that have just happened as of days ago that everyone knows about at this point. So I hope that addresses that well. In my opinion, I'm still doubting that the use of nuclear weapons is an inevitable certainty like some are trying to claim. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next question here is going to go to Mike Garcia, who said, do you think this is the first of many covert surprise drone strikes that we'll see by Ukraine on Russian soil, or do you stick to your opinion?
I would say that it's certainly not going to be the last. Now, saying that this is going to become a very common occurrence, I find that to be unlikely. It being an occurrence from here forward, most certainly. It's a new and proven kind of a tactic that the Ukrainians can use in the war, and they're going to start using that till the cows come home. But it's not going to be something that's happening every day or every week or even every month. It might be happening every several months. And we already know that the Ukrainians are expecting that this war will be going on well into the summer of next year in 2026. So it's highly likely. It's very well likely that this will be happening again several times before the war ends. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a question from none other than Ryan Guy SR, who said, do you think the Russians' targeting of civilians is starting to catch up to them, unlike Ukraine, who waste no munitions on civilians? And if not, now possibly in the future?
I think that it's starting to catch up to them a little bit. They waste a significant amount of munitions on imprecise and deliberate strikes on civilian targets, which provide no military value to attack. And so I would assume that it's probably starting to catch up to them because the Ukrainians are able to get a lot more bang for their buck because they actually make sure that their strikes are precise and actually attacking either Russia's abilities to wage war or the Russian means to wage war themselves, which is the armed forces. And so with that, I hope that addresses that somewhat well. I'd have to say that largely would be the case. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we've got a question here I'm going to take right out of the live chat that I see right now. It's from Activista, who said, if this plan, the secret attack by Ukraine, was in the works for 18 months, of course we knew about this in Activista's opinion, and you mean the attack itself? And yes. Now that brings up something interesting I just thought of. What Ukraine could have done, and this is just possible, it's speculation, is since it was in the works for 18 months, they might have technically informed the United States 18 months ago and started planning for it under the last U.S. administration. So technically, they would have informed us, but they would not have necessarily informed this new administration. But they still fulfilled the duty to inform the United States of doing that, if there is a duty at all. They did do that technically. So they would have some way to argue, well, hey, look, we did tell y'all. We told the last guy, and he should have told y'all that we were going to do this. We've been working on it for 18 months. That's possible as well, but that's just speculation. But Enforcer, what do you think?
I'd say that's probably highly likely. And that's probably the workaround is that they were like, we're not going to tell the new one. That's up for them to do that. And so they just kept going with it, and they technically did tell us, and it was greenlit. I think that probably is the most likely scenario because I have a feeling that the current administration probably wouldn't have supported that, but now they probably have no choice because if it comes out that they did inform the prior administration and no one told them, the current president about that, it's kind of on the U.S. government at that point, not on Ukraine, to make sure that we're informing the follow-up in the government that's going to be taking the place of the last president. And so with that, I hope that addresses that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, I see here, Jay Bagwell made a good observation I saw on the live chat. He said, I believe the panels on top of the containers were actually solar panels for power. I was wondering that when I was looking at it because they have that slight solar panel angle, like when you angle panels that sit on top of a roof to be able to hit the sunlight just right, to be able to get the best efficiency out of them. And it appeared to be probably solar panels. Let's go back and take a peek at that real quick. And there they are right there. Now, the only problem is unless they're very dirty and you just can't see it, actually, I think you're right, J Bagwell. That looks like solar panels right there. Now that you say that, and they're slightly angled at that little slight incline right there, that could be what kept the drones charged the entire time. And so that way their batteries didn't go dead. That could be it.
Dude, imagine if the whole operation came to a standstill because it was overcast.
That would suck. I would assume they probably have battery storage inside that container, like a battery bank to charge all the drones that the solar panels are charging. Because surely they don't have the solar panels, hooked right into the drones for continuous energy flow.
But at the same time, though, they probably weren't plugged up, though, because if they're plugged up, how do they unplug themselves? Because if you look at how they were set up in there, there is really, it doesn't look like there's any plugs or anything. It looks like they were just kind of set in there, and then they, kind of went on their way.
It'd be wireless. You can maybe put down like a dock at the bottom and it somehow wirelessly charges. I know I'm kind of making a big leap of faith there saying that, but maybe I just don't know. I don't think they're plugged up necessarily with the cord because that would be troublesome. If they try to take off, we'd probably flip it.
Yeah, they probably flip it and whip it. So maybe it was wireless. I don't know, but that's still an interesting idea, though. I'd say that's certainly not out of the realm of possibility. That I can say. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to also everybody's saying context on the bottom of the wireless charging thing. That might be what it is. Like that wouldn't be too like difficult to pull off. And it doesn't even have to be wireless charging. It could be literally just two contacts, like metal contacts, like transferring the energy. And it doesn't have to be even that advanced really. So it could be maybe that. But anyways, moving on to our next one here. This one goes to AF Kaplan. He said, why is Russia still going to Turkey for these peace talks? Might they try to attack or hurt or harm or eliminate the Ukrainian delegation at Turkey to retaliate for the Ukrainian attacks?
I would doubt it. The Ukrainian and Russian delegations have a significant amount of bodyguards, and not only that, they are there at the invitation as guests of the Turkish government, and so doing something like that would start to cause very bad relations with the Turkish government, because that would be disrespecting the diplomatic privilege that they've given to the Russian delegations and the Ukrainian delegations as well. So I would doubt that, at least at the moment. I think the negotiations tomorrow, though, are going to go absolutely nowhere because of this, and the Russians are probably going to be saying, you will surrender or die. And that will be like the ultimatum that's given to Ukraine. And the Ukrainians will say, we would rather blow up more of your bombers, kiss our ass, and then we'll be back to, the ongoing war. That'll probably be the truth of it. But with that, I hope that does address that well, at least the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, by the way, if you could pull up a picture of the drone containers at the truck stop, BC Mapper makes a good point here. He said, on the photo of the drone containers at the truck stop, did you notice that the side and top of one of the containers was lying on the ground next to the container actually in the video?
Oh, yeah, look at that.
Yeah, it is laying on the ground. And also, there's the solar panels like literally detached from the cradles right there.
You know what? They don't really have any wiring on them, though.
Yeah, that kind of is. But the wiring for solar panels is just like two leads coming out the back of it. It's really small.
Interesting. Yeah, but it kind of like just was like lifted up and then dropped off. But they didn't have a crane or anything for this. So I wonder how that happened, because it actually just looks like it wasn't any kind of like a retractable roof. The roof literally just popped off somehow and landed on the road right beside it.
Do you think maybe it hadn't like small detonators that blew? It landed too perfect though, but it maybe a hard landing was what happened, because why would the solar panels become disconnected from the railing like that unless it was like a hard smack on the ground that maybe rattled them loose or something? It seemed, I don't know, this picture is like really making me ask some questions here, because why would it land perfect if it was like mini explosives that detonated it off the top and blew it off? And also, like, I don't know, like something's not making sense here. Like my initial reaction was maybe somebody lifted it off. But then again, the Ukrainians weren't there for this. They were remote, and the driver was Russian. So why would the Russian driver take the top off a container he's transporting?
I don't really know. Maybe there was some sort of a little like electric motor that had like rollers on it, and it just pressed a roller up onto the roof. So that way, it had like some less friction to work with, and then it just shoved it right off.
Could be. I'm sort of like at a loss for this one, because no explanation seems to make sense why that landed like that. And also why the solar panels came loose. It doesn't make much sense.
Let's see here. Let's go back and look at this. So it looks like the roof might be on racks where it could just like get slided off almost.
But how would it slide like horizontal? And also, why would it land like that? Wouldn't it flip on its back instead of like on the side that it got rolled off of?
I don't really know. I'm trying to see if we can get a better look at these container boxes, because these are the only pictures shown. And there really isn't a lot to them.
This might be the most advanced part of the operation, is how they got the roof off the box.
Yeah, honestly might be, because I don't know how they got the roof off the box, really. I'm sitting here looking at it right now, and I'm like, I'm actually completely clueless as to how they really would have done that. And also, a small explosion would have damaged the drones, like if it was on all 4 points. And also, it wouldn't have landed on its bottom like it did right here. It would have landed in any odd way. And there would also be some proof of explosive matter on the sides of these panels, and there really isn't. So I don't really know what got the roof of the container off, but it's a bit of a mystery right now. That I can promise you all, because I'd have no clue at all. But with that, I hope we tried to address it well. We didn't really get to an answer, but at least we tried to address it, I guess. And it is, of course, time for us to move on into the next one.
All right, so this one goes to Adam Siegel. And Adam Siegel has a very good question here while I pull up something else on a separate screen right here so I can get it ready to reference. Adam Siegel says, financially, what would be the comparison percentage-wise to Russia's bomber fleet losses compared to the losses at Pearl Harbor with the United States? And while the enforcer looks at that, by the way, I just want to give you all this reference point. The damage was $7 billion USD in United States dollars. That's what the damage was that was quoted. That would be 549 trillion, 157 billion, 4,900,000 Russian rubles. So that's how much Russia lost today in this attack, was 549 trillion rubles in this one like multi-hour attack. That's how bad it really was in their own currency. So something they really can't afford. But I think the enforcer found the answer.
So only 6% of the U.S. Navy's active combat fleet at the time was knocked out during Pearl Harbor, compared to 34% of the active Russian bomber fleet today. So it's actually completely out of comparison. This is actually far worse than Pearl Harbor. This is actually apocalyptic compared to what Pearl Harbor did to the U.S. Navy. So there's your answer. Actually, it's a lot more shocking than I thought it was going to be. Even, and I thought that 12% of the Navy had been damaged or destroyed at Pearl Harbor, and it was actually half than that. But with that, I hope that addresses that somewhat well, at least the best we can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a question from Norm Pritchett. And Norm says, how easy is it to replace the lost Russian aircraft? Can they simply replace them in a few months, or is it going to be years?
It's going to be years. It takes them a long time just to produce a small number of Russian aircraft. I mean, they only produce 3 or 4 a month, and that's usually aircraft like an Su-27 style. Larger bombers like the Tu-160, the Tu-95, or the Tu-22, I think most of those aren't even in production. They just get rebuilds or refurbishments, and the Tu-160, I think, is the only bomber still in production. So pretty much those are lost for good, because there is no ongoing production series for Tu-95 or Tu-22s right now. And so with that, or well into the future for that matter. But with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. And we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Glock Who's Dare, who says, how many semi-trailers are already in Russia for a second strike?
Who knows? I personally think that this was the only strike of its kind for a while, but maybe there's more. Who knows? I wouldn't even be able to take a good guess at that. But with that, I hope that does address it somewhat well. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Philip Fix's LSA, who says, in honor of the first AI air attack, can Enforcer tell us about pigeon-guided bombs?
Pigeon-guided bombs. Now, that's an interesting question. Pigeon-guided bombs are an interesting one. Pigeon-guided bombs. So basically, there was an idea, at least at some point, that we could put bombs on pigeons. They would fly into a specific spot, hide in it, and then blow up. It's kind of the same thing as the bat bomb, which you can actually see mentioned right up here. I just saw that, where you would drop a bomb filled with bats. The bats would fly around with incendiary devices attached to them into nooks and crannies, catch on fire, and then burn the whole of Japan to the ground. It never really caught on a lot, but it was kind of the first idea of like a crudely guided bomb of a small size, and I believe it was generally incendiaries that were used with the pigeons. But with that, I hope that addresses that the best I can, at least on the knowledge I would know. But I don't know an insanely large amount about the pigeon bombs, because I don't think they were ever really put into use. But with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Tom Exman. He said, I have a question, Matt, about the explosives and the railway bridges. He said, could Ukraine have preset the explosives on the 2 railway bridges in Kursk before they actually retreated?
No, because these bridges were well out of the way of the front lines in both Bryansk and Kursk, so this appears to be the activity of some kind of a partisan unit that's in the area somewhere, or possibly just Ukrainian special forces that have somehow just been wandering around the whole time. But it does not appear that these bombs were planted during that time, and also it's generally standard practice when taking bridges to bring in some sort of an engineering unit and check them for explosives or anything else that could end up destroying the bridge. Also, considering that you wouldn't have direct control over the bridge anymore once you retreat and abandon it, it generally is practice to blow the bridges while you still have some control over them. So with that, I hope that does address that well, and we have reached the end of tonight's stream, and I gotta say, boy howdy folks, what a stream it was, and that's certainly no exaggeration at all. Over the course of the entire stream, we had 116,000 viewers who have watched since the beginning. Not only that, we had a peak viewership of 20,200 people. Absolutely incredible stuff, and unbelievable to know that so many people joined us tonight for the insanely breaking news that we had today. It's absolutely insane. I also got to thank everyone for supporting the fundraiser tonight, which was able to get up to a whopping $3,700. Truly incredible as well to know that so many people were continuing to support American and Western interests around the entirety of the globe. Of course, I got to thank you all greatly once again for being here tonight, and we will see you all tomorrow if there's enough news to... Actually, we will not be able to make a short war video tomorrow, unfortunately, because we will be off doing something else. So the next time you'll see us will be on Tuesday, either for a short war video or for the stream. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die.
And with that, folks, good night to you all. And once again, thank you all for joining us on the short war video today and also the stream as well to cover another historic event that we're literally watching and talking about here live on the stream and the video today. And a huge shout out to all 117,000 people that have joined us by the end of the stream and all 5,000 likes as well. We will see you all on Tuesday night once again and also midday Tuesday as well. And if something crazy happens tomorrow, there is a possibility that maybe we will have a chance to make a video or maybe a stream on it if it's something out of this world crazy. But if it's not, you will be seeing us on Tuesday. And of course, you can keep up to date on our Twitter page in the meantime. But with that, folks, thank you all for watching, and Slava Ukraine. Here on Slava, get some rest and good night.